Hey, we're going to fix my screen, and then we're going to do some more. We're in a new chapter. We're working on combat and movement for the Spelljammer Combat and Exploration project that we've been building here that we'll publish on DMsGuild. Give me a second here to go through my, to verify my signal, go through my intro spiel, and then we'll get to work today. So hold on real quick. Let's go and check my signal here real quick. Blah, blah, blah. Today. So hold on, blah. Sounds like I got some sleep. That's fantastic. Let's see. Pressing some buttons here. Clickety clackety, clackety, cha-chunk, cha-chunk. Copy. Let's go through my intro spiel here real quick, and then we'll get to work. So, all right. Hey, my name is Phil Kearney. I create role-playing game supplements. I illustrate them, and then I publish them online. I've been focusing my attention on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for the past few years. There are links to numerous books that I have created and illustrated on DMsGuild already below. They have extensive free previews, so if you're here for the art, there's probably about 150 different illustrations across those books. All you gotta do is click on the full preview button to check out the kind of work that I build if you aren't familiar with my channel already. If you are a D&D enthusiast, then there is extensive free previews on everything. So whether you're a DM or a player, the ideas that I create are designed to be used on both sides of the screen. So if there's anything cool there that you like, consider adding it to your campaign. If you think it plays well, then consider making a purchase to support the stream. Otherwise, best ways to support the stream, hold on here real quick, is to clear my plate here and switch screens. Cha-chunk. If you want to support me here on Twitter, you can follow me at Phil Kearney. Otherwise, the next best thing anyone can possibly do or help out and continue growth is with a like button, subscribe, bell icon to get notification of when I'm live in the future. We are at 204 members right now, so I'm certainly hoping to build to 1,000 or more. But I would love to be able to have more subscribers than I have episodes of the stream. So we're at 206 right now. If there's new people out there that are checking it out, I'd love to have you on board with me, and especially if you find that there's value in the artwork or the ideas about role-playing games that we share here while we hammer away at art. So let's see, what are we doing? We had been working on the exploration chapter. Or sorry, the ships and equipment section of this chapter for the past couple weeks. That section is now done. So if you can check my last Spelljammer stream to kick through all the artwork that's in that section. But now we are in the combat section. So let me just take a second here to crack open the Word document here where we're dropping stuff into. I've got very little art actually integrated into this yet. However, scrolling back a bit. So the front end of this is done, like the first 12 pages. The hazard section is done, which is like another 10 pages. We've got rough layouts. The creature menagerie is done, which is another 15 pages. So here we are looking at the master documents, and we start with combat over here, and it goes through down to the spellcasting chapter, which we've also finished, which starts here. So we got about 36 pages of text that we need to complete across here. And so this is the cover we created back around episode 15. And so here's the combat chapter that we began work on. Actually, zoom in here. Combat. And then, do a 2-page format here. So the combat section will start on here. And then we've got multiple pages here. Like we have the first half of the combat section here, and everything that has a lock symbol on it already is completed. Like you have the lock section here. We created this page of art. Actually, I think like back around, I want to say, whoa, let's get on the screen here, Kearney. Hey. I think I completed this one back around, maybe around episode 110, maybe? I'm not positive. Maybe 70? I don't know. You can check back in the stream. I need to reorganize the titles of all the streams so it breaks down chapters easier. But this was the basic mechanics on map scale and weapon ranges and ship combat maps. This is where it begins, and then this map isn't done yet, so we get to work on this one some more. There's also, there's a bunch of pages that don't have anything yet. So we are catching up on the chapter as we go through stuff. We'll walk through everything that's in here so folks can have an idea of what it is that this book is doing. And we'll just keep building this thing until it's done. So, cheers. So let's see. We are currently looking at... I don't think I need to work on this one anymore at the moment. Because we got a bunch of blank pages to look at. But this is... for those that are interested in seeing this stuff, you can zoom in on the text here and take a look at some of the chunky mechanics. Inertia shock is fun. And we can talk about inertia shock today. Let's find a blank page. Map scale, the different ranges of combat, what you can do with different weapon systems. And then we go into more detail. We've poked at this one enough that we know what we're doing here. Actually, let's just spend a few minutes on this one. I can use white to get a better sense of what we're going to do. So this is the 500-foot scale. So you have star moths. And then we have a 10 by 10 square here, which equals 1 mile. So this is the size of the light citadel. Oh, I should set a timer on my clock. Let me get my clock to set a timer with. Here we go with that. Hey. Let's get a 20-minute timer going so I can keep kicking through in a timely fashion. Make sure I don't get caught up on any details too much. 20 minutes. On the block. There we go. Take a sip of coffee. It was probably around episode 20 that we built out this star moth. This is it's like I think it's a 100 by 100 inch map that we built for this. That will include in the with the book. And for the Latizaraxis in the back, the second appendix in the book is like a 20-page conversion guide to using the rules that we have for this combat and exploration book that we've been designing. And worth noting, the Latizaraxis adventure itself is 68 pages. And we add on 20 pages worth of mechanics, like how to have deeper ship combat or ship exploration or characters using the different mechanics that are in this book throughout the Latizaraxis adventure. So I know that I'm awfully late to the party, that a lot of people have played Latizaraxis, but people will forever play Latizaraxis. So this will remain valuable for folks forever. LeFou, I'm afraid I've been thinking. It's a dangerous pastime, I know. Okay, so 500-foot scale here. You've got these, we have these star moths that are going to block our team's entry up here. I've talked about this, I think back, as early as episode 3. Enemy fleet comes in from this way. Star moths intercept your team. Once you get to this point, which is a 500-foot square, if you have one star moth here that you're engaging with, and your ship is here that you're engaging with, you don't really need more space than this. But if you wanted to have multiple star moths engaging you, you could instead transition to a larger space. To be able to engage with multiple ships at the same time. Or you could have, like, this is the size of a Chessex 48 by 36 map. That is pretty typical for being on a full-size kitchen table, or a living room table where you could have like 6 people gathered around one table. This map would fit on that, and you could just have, instead of sectioning this up, you could use 50-foot scale for Theater of the Mind. You could use the 500-foot scale for Theater of the Mind, and you've got the 5-foot scale that you would be able to have 2 ships alongside each other. Like here's your ship, and then here's a star moth. Like if you're doing full-size maps at your table, you could do this. I think my recommendation is to prioritize the 500-foot scale so that you can have large-scale distance, like siege weapon attacks at multiple, up to a mile away. And that also allows you to maneuver and try to get through forces using like normal 5e combat. You're going to have opportunity attacks, and you're going to have to maneuver your way through ships just like you would in any dungeon combat to try to get to the citadel to destroy it, if that's how you're approaching this, or to sneak through. All these ship tokens at the 500-foot scale is the most valuable because it's allowing your ships to engage with the citadel directly. The 50-foot scale is useful if you're going to be engaging if you're going to stay locked in combat with another ship. You could, at this scale here, be here and here and be maneuvering around together. If you're trying to get past that ship and the pilot on the enemy ship is pacing you, you're going to stay locked in position like this while you're attempting to maneuver your way through troops. So you could potentially accumulate a number of enemy ships that are pacing you and sticking on you like a dogfight. As you're moving through the sky, you're weaving and engaging with different fighter ships, but you're still making progress in one direction or another. So by pacing, using your reaction to maintain position and move with the enemy ship during combat, these ships could be engaged in combat here while you're still locked here at the 50-foot scale in this core central battle here. And then if you wanted to have a larger space of engagement, again, you could have here with a ship here and a ship here, all maintaining position with you while you're still traversing the larger map over here towards your target. So then you have to do things like disengage. You have to use the disengage action to break off pacing to be able to continue moving through, and that gets fighter ships off of you at the 50-foot scale. So that's some of the ideas that we have. So the way that we're depicting that is we've started building it here. Enemy fleet, like this is actually, spoiler alert, this is actually from the Lies of Araxis chapter, final chapter, the massive fight. I don't mention it directly here in the book, but I'll spoiler it for you that this is in there. Hold on. I feel like I've got some weirdness attached to the back end of this map. Oh, there we go. That fixed it. So you can pause here to read this stuff if you want. I won't hold up your time too much, but we need to put like A, B's, and C's in here. A, B, and C. The illustration above depicts the Star Moth A, a Flitter B, and a Hammerhead ship C on the separate 50-foot scale. So what we would need to have is a Hammerhead ship. Burp. Hey, Beefy, how you doing, my guy? Let's close this up. Wrong closure, Kearney. 34. I'll catch up with your words here in a second, my man. Fleet. Citadel. Let's drop these into the 500. That's probably a good way to parse this 500-foot scale. And then here at the 50-foot scale. And then the 5-foot scale. Beefy says, so what physical product would you recommend purchasing if I wanted to use physical grids? Also, hello. Hey, thanks a lot for joining. That's really kind. Thank you. AJ Pickett. No, MT Black. Sorry. Isn't AJ? Fuck. There's I recommend the scrolls, like the vellum scrolls that you can roll up that you can dry erase on. ChessX makes a 48 by 36. I think it's 48 by 36 inch grid. That I've got on a map here, but there's a new one that's coming out that you can even put in the oven, and it survives being cooked. So it's incredibly. I can't remember the name of it. If someone reminds me, I'll figure out where that's at. But it's the same thing. It's like it's a square grid on one side and it's a hex on the other side. Dry erase. You can just wipe it clean. I've used those for years at the table. Like they've been my mainstay at home tables since I want to say 2002 is when I first ran across ChessX, and I've used them ever since. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. 5 foot scale, 50. Okay, so the 50 foot scale, we've got A, B, and C. What do we have here? 1 mile space. The illustration above depicts an asteroid base occupying one. See, I don't even mention it by name. A fleet of star moths and flitters. B, enemy ships. C. I don't even mention you by name. A, B, and C is where you're at there. And then, so the illustration above depicts a star moth, a flitter, and a hammerhead ship. So we'll need to have, I'm just sketching out what's still necessary here. So we need a star moth here, a flitter, B, and then a hammerhead ship here. Let's get our sizes accurate, shall we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this. Hammerhead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, we'll have our signature circle around it when it's done for its air bubble. And then I'll want to resize these shenanigans. B, because at the 50 foot scale, each square is 50 feet, and a flitter ship, here I'll show you the flitter ship again if you missed it. Let's condense this here. Great. So 500 foot scale, ships all, individual ships, there you go. At the 50 foot scale, you've got a flitter craft that only fits in 1 square because it's a 50 foot by 50 foot craft. And at the 50 foot scale, you have a hammerhead ship, which is 5 by 5, so it's a 250 foot long ship. Here we have a close-up at the 250 foot scale. At the 5 foot scale, to show the full breadth of the hammerhead ship, I need to change the icons in the hammerhead ship up here. So I guess technically this isn't actually done yet. So I'll need to fix that, but I'll fix it this afternoon, I'm sure. And then here's the 5 foot scale. And again, a flitter ship here at the 50 foot, which is a 50 foot by 50 foot craft. And then you got the hammerhead ship here, which is a 250 foot by roughly 30 feet wide. But because of the way that spacing works in D&D, like with horses and shit, right? Like a horse fills a 2 by 2 square, even though we all know that a horse is long. Like in 3rd edition, they had long, large, and they had broad, large. Long large were only 5 feet wide, 10 feet long, like a horse. And then in positioning, like which direction it faced, mattered because of the space that the elongated space that it occupied. And then you'd have like a hill giant, which fills the entire space, and so it'd be a 2 by 2. The 2 by 2s would have a 10 foot reach, and the 5 by 10s would only have a 5 foot reach. So like their reach was half. Originally, we were looking at using that elongated footprint for ships in general, but we wanted to make 5e ship combat as identical to the 5 foot scale dungeon combat as possible, which means that even though this is horse-like and elongated, it actually fills this entire space because you want to be able to rotate and move freely. The way that 5e combat works is you're a gyroscope. You can churn you have gyroscopic navigation. You can spin in any direction in spaces, hovering, and you have the ability to fire up to 10,000 miles per round of movement if you are free of any objects that would prevent you from doing that. So you have a very wide range of movement that you can use, so you need to be able to have space, like actual physical space enough to not be squeezed or have any trouble like that. We have mechanics about squeezing that we use down in the in an asteroid challenge of weaving through asteroids later on in the book. So at the 50 foot scale, these small fighter crafts only occupy 1 square at the 50 foot range. So if we're doing, let's get back to here and get this back opened up and get back into it here. So at the 50 foot scale, this fighter craft is literally only filling up one of these squares, and your ship is filling up this much space. So if this ship is going to engage with you, there's a ton of space on this, even on this little strip, to be able, because if your goal is to close distance, to get from the 500 foot scale to the 5 foot scale so that you can board the ship and take it, capture it, or ransom the crew, whatever, then you're going to want to close. You want to close that distance as quickly as you can, potentially even skipping the 50-foot scale altogether. If your goal is to not get boarded and you've got ships that are locking onto you, then they're going to be basically maintaining this relative position to you at the 50-foot scale while you're, again, as I was just talking about, maneuvering at the 500-foot scale, potentially trying to like crash them into asteroids, whatever other fun stuff you have laying around out in the field at the 500-foot scale. This becomes just a smaller instance of where your ships are relative engaging with each other while you're trying to get in or out of being boarded. So any of these stages can be theater, and we talk about this in obviously down in the book a little bit. You can use theater of the mind at any scale if you want to have it represented on the map because it's relevant to your challenge or not. There's challenges further down where you are characters on a skiff, on a fighter ship, are operating at the 50-foot scale only. So the entire map, that's like a 100-inch by 100-inch map, is only at the 50-foot scale because your fighter ship is weaving through asteroids chasing targets in that particular challenge. You don't need a larger vessel. So the 500-foot scale becomes irrelevant. And then the 5-foot scale in that encounter is, since the macro is the 50-foot scale, then 5-foot scale is only necessary if your fighter ship is within 10 squares of another target adjacent at the 50-foot scale. It then becomes adjacent by being on the same map space here. So that's how that works. Let's see. So I want to make A, B, and C. So we'll have this Star Moth is a 4x4. So we can actually start off by making a 4x4 circle and then putting a Star Moth in it. A. And go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And actually, what I want to do is bring this B back to here and have it in the same A here. This is the same 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. This is the same 5 by 5 block, although we have up to 50. Like I could have the firecraft anywhere inside this 50-foot square and still be in bounds of what this 10 by 10 square here is within bounds what this 500-foot scale here is. So I could have one icon here representing multiple ships at this scale if I wanted to. And we talk about that in the fleet and squadron section further down in the book as well, about positioning multiple ships inside the same square of space so that you can manage all the ships as the same creature. And we want to have these positioned out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. C. Like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This helps visualize the space a little bit better. Two, 3, 4, 5. Yep, this is how they would sit at this. Like if my hammerhead ship were here, that's how this would appear here. And then at the 5-foot scale, I'm actually going to do this, which means I have to have the letters at the top. Like this. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like that. The illustration above depicts a flitter boarding party, A. Landing on the deck of a hammerhead ship, B. On a separate 5-foot scale map, while still present on the 550-foot scale maps. That's best accurate. ABC, ABC, AB. There. Drone scales used when you board ships and directly attack the creatures aboard them. You can minimize the size of a 5-foot map scale during combat by dividing ship deck plans into 10 by 10 sections, only placing the section in use each round, adding or changing sections as needed. Ship tokens, deck plans, and various maps are included with the supplement when purchased at the DMsGuild, and then I place a hyperlink here. Because I'm cheeky. Hey, timely timer. I advertise my own. I advertise my book in my own book because I know that people can just download it as a sample and read through it. So I occasionally pepper in little reminders that where they got it from. So if somebody pirates it, or if they did download it and they decided that it was worth their time to actually purchase after playing with it for a while, self-referencing yourself is not shameful. I also put advertisements in the back of my book for other books. So, I mean, promote your shit, man. It's okay if it gets pirated. It's free advertising. You just got to know where to buy it. So you can't stop piracy. God knows why anyone would pirate my crap, because it's, you can just grab it. But having said that, this is how this map is going to work out. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm going to move on to... Let me get rid of that. Burp. Burp, burp, burp. Burp, 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 burp. Yeah, we'll have to construct. That's just going to be a bunch of construction stuff. I don't know how exciting it is watching me cutting and pasting ship tokens from one map to the other. So I think what I'll probably be doing is focusing most of my attention on what like actual illustrations occur. But I do need to lay out what each one of these are. So I'm happy to do that during this process, and then when we flip, and then when we circle back around to the details, we'll know specifically what we need, which pages we actually need to focus on, and which ones we can just fill in during off time. So I can have more on time doing actual illustration and more downtime doing construction. But I do want to figure out what's on these. So let's see. Changing scale during combat. As detailed above, you can change the scale and distance while moving during combat. The ship that characters are aboard is simultaneously present on the 550 and 5-foot scales. Yeah. That's like Robbie Sanchez said, they're giving out to people for free and just asking for tips. I know. Yeah, I like making all my books 100% free preview. People keep buying them anyway. I've got multiple times. I mean, Electrum is not a bad title on the DMsGuild. Electrum is when you sell 250. Gold is when you sell 500 or more of a 501 or more of a product. And like in the link down below, the color mana spell point variant rules bundle that I have down there, most of those books are like within 40 sales of being gold. So like literally hundreds of people that play MTG and D&D together that are interested in color mana have purchased those books, and that's probably about a third of the people that actually downloaded it and are considered whether they wanted to use it or not. I get sales all the time. I'll get a notification that somebody's downloaded Point Warlocks for free. It's a pay what you want. They can choose to buy it or not, but I get a recording, a note that it's been purchased. So I will see that somebody grabs the revised color mana spell point list and Point Warlocks. They'll download those for free. I'll see that, and then the next day I get a sale for the rest of the books in the bundle minus the Warlock and the revised spell point list. So the marketing information that I get from the website tells me that when I bundle stuff with pay what you want, and then I advertise all those books together as a bundle, that once people read the idea, they'll come back and they'll actually buy it because they found value in it. Otherwise, why would they bother buying it? They've already grabbed stuff for free. There's no reason for them to circle back around and buy it other than people are honest about what they want to use, and they like to support people that have good ideas. So I have a lot of faith built up from the DMs Guild that if I do right by the consumer and show them what it is that they're getting so they know why they're paying the money that they're paying for, they just get it. And it's not a problem. It's honestly really inspiring. So it actually makes me very, very proud of how honest people really are, especially gamers that want to support other gamers, and people that like good ideas, that want to support and make sure that, they stay active. It's very rewarding. So, which is why I don't think other than I'm not very popular, because all my stuff is really niche. But I've never seen any reason for anybody, I've never seen it get pirated anywhere. I think it's just because it's so easy to get the stuff already. Why would you need to pirate it? Anyway, so if there are no targets less than 500 feet away, the 50-foot scale map can be ignored until a target is close enough to be placed on this map. Similarly, the 5-foot scale map isn't necessary until a target is close enough to you, to your ship, to use it. For example, if a 50-foot scale map is placed on a 10 by 10 grid, your ship and target must be within 500 feet to be placed on this map. And then I can have an illustration here of ships at the 500-foot scale. But I need to flip that map because in the illustration above, here, cool. The illustration above, the hammerhead ship was descending while the flitter ships were ascending. Actually, you know what? Maybe it's considering that things could be coming from the player's point of view, maybe I should flip this script completely down here and make that AB. I cannot free transform. Something must be locked. I think I should flip this. Yeah, that feels weird. I mean, I know the letters are upside down. That's no thing. But the butterfly being upside down feels weird. For it to be acknowledged, for it to be recognized as a butterfly, I think it needs to be right side up. So let's just have this be DM facing and be damned the players. Glad we had this little TED Talk here. TED Talk. So we know to flip this. Nope. I don't know, I call it a TED Talk. It's just me discovering shit. There. Shifting scale. The illustrations below depict how combat shifts from one map to another when you're close enough to a target to change scale relative to it. 500-foot scale. At the 500-foot scale, generally all relevant ships and creatures not aboard ships themselves can be placed on this map. When a ship moves to a square adjacent to a target at the 500-foot scale, you can close distance by placing them on the 50-foot scale map 5 squares apart. If that space is occupied, place the targets in the next farthest square relative to your position on the map. You can then choose to use any remaining movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, let's see. You're probably going to want to have grid. That is the 500-foot scale. So you have a ship here, and like a ship here, and then when we do movement on these maps, since there's the air bubbles that surround ships, we can actually draw a faded line showing where they were in the past and where they arrive in the future by having a faded back and then fading into full opacity here. So I have that in the spellcasting chapter a little bit, but we'll be able to emphasize it here and have, you know, tracer arrows. So it goes like that. So it like fades out and then like it fades and then it snaps into focus here. That's the idea behind that. I should probably oh yeah, I can do that because in the previous window we established these blocks here with these squares here, so we already established 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Yeah. I don't actually need these action lines here, these scoping lines. I think I can get rid of those. But we're established, I think we're doing a good job establishing squares of range. So when I'm illustrating here, I can use that line break here. That's good enough. I can do that. That's great. Ship, so you have like your boop boop galleon here, and then like your wasp ship here. When a ship moves to a square adjacent to a target at the 50-foot scale, you can close distance by placing them on the 5-foot scale map 5 squares apart. If that space is occupied, place the targets in the next farthest square relative to your position on the map. You can then choose to use any remaining movements. So let's move to we'll do a galleon here. We can do a wasp here. That's fun. ship increases scale to move away from this extreme proximity. It is removed from the map unless you choose to pace it. Otherwise, the ship remains at its current location on the 50-foot scale on the 50-foot map, and if you choose, use any remaining movement. So I could go like this. If a ship increases scale to move away from oh my god, that's kind of yes, I like that. Remains on the ship remains, so I could go here, arrow like that. Otherwise, the ship remains at its current location. Here. That's fun. When a ship moves to a square adjacent to a target at the 500-foot scale, you can close distance by placing them on the 50-foot scale. So I can go here. Yeah, this is accurate. Here, line, line. You can then choose to use any remaining movement. Good point. Hold on. Let's do that. Light bulb. That. Waha, that's gonna work. That is gonna work. Nice. All right, cool. So, let's see. All right, just to review again. When the ship moves to a square adjacent to a target at the 500-foot scale, you can close distance by placing them on the 50-foot scale map 5 squares apart. If that space is occupied, place the target in the next farthest square relative to your position on the map. You can then choose to use any remaining movement. If a ship increases scale to move away from the battle, remove it from the map unless you choose to pace the target as described in the pacing section below. When a ship moves to a square adjacent to a target at the 50-foot scale, you can close distance by placing them on the 5-foot scale map 5 squares apart. If that space is occupied, place the targets at the next farthest square relative to your position on the map. You can then choose to use any remaining movement. If a ship increases scale to move away from combat at the 50-foot scale, it is removed from the map unless you choose to pace it. Otherwise, the ship remains. You know what? I think what I want to do is remove all this language about pacing, because pacing becomes an exception. It's a way to stay locked in position with a ship as you move. So I think I could probably. It is removed from the map. And text. So when it comes to ship combat, who controls what the ship does? Does every player on the ship roll for initiative and have their own places, or is it just a team game strategy game? By own places. Oh, yeah. I hear what you're saying. We haven't got, I don't remember what section it was that we first started talking about ship rolls, but let's see if I can find some here real quick for you. Yep. Ship rolls. As described in the Spelljammer's Adventures in Space, the only role necessary to operate a spelljamming ship is that of the pilot. In Spelljammer's Combat and Exploration, this book, we established what those initials mean earlier in the book. Piloting is just one of many actions you can take aboard a ship in combination with other actions you can normally take at the 5-foot scale of adventuring. Role, pilot. Asterisk, requires focusing on a helm. Duties are moving the ship and attacking with ship melee weapons. Ship commander. Duties. Commanding siege crews to attack with ranged ship weapons. Squadron commander, 2 asterisk, requires focusing on an orrery. And we established what an orrery is up in the equipment section, the display system that allows you to see objects relative to you in space. Commanding, your role as a squadron commander is commanding ally ships to move and attack. And then the support role, which also requires focusing on an orrery. The spelljamming helm itself, as we established in the equipment section, is also an orrery. So you can use the, if you're the pilot or if you're specifically standing at an orrery station, in either one of those, you can use the squadron commander or support role, which is assisting pilots and commanders. So we know what the action economy in 5th edition is. It's movements, it's object interaction, once per round for free. Action, bonus action, reaction, and then if you're using the attack action, you get individual attacks within that action if you have multiple attacks. So, using those roles, you can freely mix combat at the 5-foot scale with any ship combat you would decide, whether you are in a position to, you have to be within 5 feet or occupying the same space as the orrery and the helm to be able to use those roles. So if you are focusing on the helm and you are on it or within 5 feet of it, then you are able to perform pilot actions. If you are at an orrery, which includes the helm, you can perform squadron commanders and support actions. And if you are in command of, you can use and then if you're in command of a weapon crew or ships, if you have verbal command of them, then you can use your action economy to have them take actions. So the pilot can, as an object interaction, it's kind of the same, like you get 1 object interaction per round. So in all of our vehicle mechanics, an object interaction counts as steering the ship. Like if you were driving a car, you'd be interacting with the steering wheel, and then you could use your regular action to move again, kind of like the dash action at the 5-foot scale when you're running through a dungeon. You've got your normal movement, which doesn't matter on the ship because you're sitting in a chair, but the ship has movement, so the object interaction becomes your movement for that round. And if you want to dash, then you can use your action. This is all happening at the 6-second scale because these ships can move 100 million miles per day, which means that they can move 10,000 miles every 6 seconds, which means that each square on your grid is 1,000 miles, which is so much slower than what your maximum speed can be. That you at the 5 foot, like 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles is the minimum square for overland movement during the course, like over the course of a 24-hour period of time. But in combat, you have to move have such a much smaller scale. 500 feet, 1 mile, 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles. You are 4 scales of magnitude smaller than your maximum speed when you're engaging with ships in ship-to-ship combat, because trebuchets only have a 1,500-foot range. So if you are at the 1 mile or larger scale, you are out of combat, unless you're hitting objects that can't move and you're just lobbing things at them from afar across the void. You'll eventually hit them, but it takes more than a round to get there. So, as I say, if you can literally see weapons coming from a mile away, so you can just get out of the way and the shot misses you if you know it's there. If you don't, then your attack is basically invisible if they don't see it coming, but you're at disadvantage at that range. So you gain advantage over your target that doesn't know you're coming, but you're at disadvantage for firing that far away. It just becomes a straight shot without advantage or disadvantage. If the ship doesn't know it's coming, they could get hit depending on if you roll high enough or not, but then they'll definitely know that there's something there, so you can only do that once. So you can hit something from far away, but then you could also use that turn. You fire once, maybe you hit them. You can then close distance within the 500-foot scale and then start engaging them in normal ship combat. That's all in 6 seconds because these ships move so motherfucking fast that you don't have to worry about, like a boat in the water has a much slower movement speed. That making significant distance, like 10 miles, is going to take you like an hour, maybe. Something like, I don't remember the exact scale, but like maybe an hour for 10 miles while you're on a boat. But in space, you have this almost infinite speed. Speed is infinite outside of combat. Your scale of movement is so much greater than what you can do in combat that speed becomes irrelevant. So if you just break down squares into any square, you can move technically any amount of distance. And we talk about, like, if you're at the 50-foot scale, you could still move a mile at the 50-foot scale. But if you want to engage ships at the 50-foot scale, if you're both moving like 100 miles per hour, but you're staying relative to each other, then the only thing you have to calculate is, can I close distance or not? And at that scale, you can narrate that you were able to close or open distance, even though you say flying at 10,000 miles per hour. If you're on the same square, on the same grid, as long as you remain pacing and engaged, if you can't disengage your target, they're always going to be able to stay with you, like dogfighting. Even though you're flying at 100 million miles per day, or 5 million miles per hour, even though you're flying at 5 million miles per hour, if you stay within 500 feet of your target, you can continue to engage them in combat. And that's a chase. That's how you get into like weaving through asteroid fields and stuff. If you're in an asteroid field that occupies a 10,000 mile space and you're flying at 5 million miles per hour, if you try to fly through the asteroid field, you're going to slam into asteroids. So you have to slow your pace. You have to slow your scale to a point where it's matching the obstacles that you're interacting with. So that, like, if I were at the 50, like if there were a new asteroid every 50 feet, and I'm moving at a scale of 10 miles per square, if I'm going to move one square at 10 miles per square, at the 50-foot scale, I just slammed into a rock. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to take falling or collision damage for my ship and everybody aboard because I slammed at light speed into a rock. That gets you killed. So you have to drop your speed down to weave through obstacles at the size that those obstacles, like if it's a 500-foot asteroid field, then I can scale down to the 500-foot scale, still engage in range combat with ships while you're weaving through asteroids, basically moving through a dungeon with giant rocks, like a rock field in any 5-foot scale. If you're trying to dodge archers by moving between rocks, then you can do that same thing at this scale with ships. Instead of archers, they're ballistas and catapults. And instead of bushes, thickets, and boulders, they're asteroids that are 500, maybe 1,500 feet in size that you have to dodge around or over or under to be able to get away from enemies to create cover for yourself. But you can engage in that same cloud. But as long as you're staying relative to each other's position, whether you're in a chase at high speeds or you're slowing speed to navigate through dangerous terrain, in either way, the language works the same. It's just a matter of, are we just moving in the same direction? So we just always have our ships facing the same direction, and so we can just pace through there and get closer or further away from each other? Or are we at absolute positioning, stationary positioning, where like what direction you face, you could actually narrate that you're facing different directions and moving around like that. Even though in 5e combat at the 5-foot scale, there is no facing. It doesn't matter which direction the ogre is facing. He still has an area around him, his reach, that he can attack with. Same thing with these ships. That's why we have these air bubble spheres and that spacing around the ships to represent the same way that an ogre can attack in any direction. These ships, as described in Adventures in Space, the actual WotC product, each round these ships can rotate on any direction to make sure that weapons can always train fire on their targets. So you have this neat, at the fighter ship scale, at this close combat scale, that's kind of like Viper fighting in Battlestar Galactica, where they use momentum and centrifugal force to reorient. Like they can fly backwards and point their nose back at ships and be firing at ships that are chasing them because they ramped up to a speed and then flip their nose around and start taking shots. And they can, you see that all the time in the new Battlestar Galactica series, like 2007. That is some of the coolest, best space combat using physics I've seen. That and The Expanse do a lot of cool stuff with using momentum and centrifugal force. And you can narrate those same mechanics by not caring what direction, like what you're facing is. And that's a mechanic that most Spelljammer alternatives that are out there suggest that like orientation and facing matters, but you can't have cool fighter ship combat if you have to worry about what direction your nose is facing. So Wizards already got rid of that. We're just expanding on like why you can use that and why that can be cool. Like this book is basically a big apology letter to the community about like, hey, if Wizards had invested time, they could have said all this stuff and had a real deep, rich mechanical option that you'd be able to be able to interact with. But I'm the guy that thought of it. So lucky me, I get to publish it. So actions in combat, you've got your movement, which allows you basically ship movements, 5 squares, and then so that's like 25 feet at the 5-foot scale. And then you can use your dash action here with a move ship, then move another 5 squares. A rogue has a bonus action to also dash. So if you're allowing character mechanics to affect ships, then you'd be able to have a rogue pilot take that, or a monk pilot to be able to take that third action, so they can move 15 squares. And then at the 5-foot scale, at the 500-foot scale, that's only 1,500 feet. That's only a mile and a half, which is 1,000 times slower than they could be moving while they're engaging in combat. So those mechanics work. The ship pilot uses melee weapons like rams, grappling claws, and other melee weapons. The pilot's in charge of those. So like having a berserker barbarian or a paladin or a fighter with multiple attacks. Not so much a ranger. Rangers are better off as siege commanders because they can use their ranged spells to amplify what siege weapons can do. But like a barbarian, a paladin, or a fighter as the pilot, they can use their multiple actions to make multiple ship attacks. And they got bonus actions here to like defend, to increase your armor class, and to make better advantage on saves, to disengage, to get away from ships that are attempting to pace you, or make opportunity attacks against you. So you have those as well as the pilot. The pilot's basically your melee fighter on the ship. Then you got your siege commander, which is the ranged attacks on the ship. You can take command of any number of weapon crews at a time. We'll talk about weapon crews further on in the book. But then you can use your action to either attack. And so there's like breath weapons. Like when a dragon breeds a breath weapon, you have a recharge die. Instead of using your proficiency bonus, use a proficiency die. Like a 5th level character rolls a d6 instead of having a +3. And if your proficiency die, when you make your attack, it not only factors into whether you hit your target or not, but that's also your recharge die. So if you're say a ballista crew has a recharge number, has a reload score of 3. So for you to be able to attack and then reload your weapon as part of the same attack action, your reload die or your command die d6 has to roll a 3 or better. So you're most likely going to be able to reload a ballista, but like a catapult has a recharge of 5. So it's not realistic for you to be able to fire a catapult each turn or each attack until like say maybe level 10, where you've got a d8. So on a d8 you can roll a 5, 6, 7, or 8. At 17th level, you've got a d12. So it's incredibly easy for you to reload a ballista. But like if you wanted to fire 3 ballistas and each of them have a reload score of 3, you could fire 3 ballistas at once and coordinate all the crews to be able to reload the weapon for another attack at 17th level on a 9, 10, 11, or 12, because you're using a d12 at 17th level. These are called proficiency dice. They're a variant mechanic in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So all the rules that we're using here for ship combat are either in the player's handbook or in the DMG as alternate rules that we're using for new reasons. Kind of like how Theros used renown in Ravnica for guild renown, but in Theros they use renown as piety, which is basically the same thing. So we're using the action economy and mechanics from actual 5e published content for Wizards of the Coast to recreate how characters can engage at different scales. So Siege Commander, that's what they do. If they screw up that recharge, they can instead spend an action. Instead of firing again, they can use that action to have one weapon reload. So if I'm firing 3 ballistas at once and I botch my reload, I now have to spend an action to reload each of those weapons before they can all fire again. Or I could just reload one of them and have that guy attack. Like if I'm a 17th level fighter with 3 attacks per round, fire all weapons. I fucked up my reload, so now I'm going to reload one of them, and now I can fire that single weapon again. But I could also use my bonus action to attack as well. And I can use my reaction to reload. So if I fire 3 ballistas, I botch the save, I can then use my reaction to reload one of them, use a bonus action to reload a second one, use my second attack to reload the third one, and then use my last attack action to fire all weapons again. So even if a fighter at 17th level screws up reloading three weapons, he has enough action economy that he can reload all 3 of those weapons and fire them all again by himself during his round. But any character in the support role could also lend an action by help reload. So a ship support could help the siege commander reload weapons as an extra action. So you can get your support character to help, say, your pilot focus, so they have advantage on attacks when they're melee weapons. They could use a bonus action to help focus, or to target. Like targeting is, we have all this stuff listed further down in the book here. Like here, you got like pacing, ramming, ready action, scuttle. So we can go all through all this stuff, and we can talk about that more. But as you can see, we're using 5e scale combat to do where did it go? Meow. There. So you can mix and match. We talk about this in the book later on. Like you could be, if you're in a fighter ship, you could be both the pilot and the siege commander firing weapons. And you could also be a squadron commander. You could be like, if you're in a fighter ship with an open helm, you could have a crossbow. You could fire a crossbow at an enemy ship. You could then move the ship. You could then command your wingmen to attack, and you could then command the siege crew to fire the ballista that's on your boat. You can do all 4 of those things together if you have enough action economy to do it between the number of attacks that you have, your action, your interaction, your bonus action, your reaction. So all that stuff can happen at the same time. And since we divide up the map between 500-foot scale, 5-foot scale, and 50-foot scales, if you have targets at the 5-foot or 50, no, give me that. If you have targets at the 5-foot or 50-foot scale, you can fire your crossbow at them. If you're operating at the 50 and 500-foot scale, you could be doing ship stuff. If you've got people on your deck at 5 foot, you could walk over and stab them with a sword, but you have to leave the helm, so you wouldn't be able to move your ship anymore if you did that. So people that are stuck at the helm and stuck at the orrery station are doing ship stuff, while people that are on the open deck are firing siege weapons and fighting boarding crews if there are any. If there are no boarding crews, you completely forget about the 5-foot map, and all you have to do is interact at the 50-foot and 500-foot scale while your ships are dogfighting. If you get within melee reach and you want to scrap at it because you have a strong pilot, then you're going to want to close into the 50-foot scale so you can take shots at each other. A 5-foot by 5-foot hammerhead ship has a reach of 5 squares, just like a 2x2 ogre has 2 squares worth of space, 10-foot reach. These work exactly the same way. So at this 50-foot scale, I can scrap with other ships if I can maintain my distance. But if these guys want to board me, if I'm going to allow them to get close enough to me to actually board my ship, now I have to waste my action economy fighting people on my crew. Well, I could still have multiple ships attacking me at the 50 or 500-foot scale. So I have to deal with both this map and this map at the same time, but you have them on separate maps. And your ship is represented here and your character is represented here. And you can either do group initiative or you can do individual initiative. In our playtesting, we found that group initiative, if you had multiple ships, it just took too long. And the whole team was just kind of waiting for it. And then, so they liked having individual actions, but at my home table, we like doing group initiative, where we just break up our action economy amongst each other and just do our thing, and then let the other team attack. So you could have a group initiative here at the 550-foot scale, but as soon as things get aboard ship, you could then have individual initiative between the creatures that are boarding your ship and the people that are dealing with it. So at the top of the round, or at the back of the round, or whenever you want during the round, you can move your ship around and move around your deck and fight things at the ship level and at the individual level all at the same time. So it's very fluid. And all you have to do is just decide, how do I want my action economy broken up? If I spend all my attacks coordinating my squadron to fire at the enemy ships, then all I have is a bonus action and a reaction left over. That maybe I use a bonus action to cast a spell at something that's trying to get aboard the ship, and maybe I hold my reaction to, counter a spell, or to help somebody on my team to help reload. I botched my reload score. I'm almost out of action economy. Well, then my character's going to use the support role, and he's going to offer, I'm going to use my reaction to reload your weapon. That interrupts my attack sequence. You reloaded my weapon for me as a reaction. I can now use my last attack to make another siege attack because you helped me reload the weapon using your action economy. But this is all being done through like anywhere from like 2 to 8 people that are manning the crew of the ship. They're all taking their actions, bonus actions, movement, and object interactions to pick up, move objects into place, and then place them, aim, and fire. There's like 3 actions they can take per person, and like a ballista only requires 3 actions to attack. So if you have a crew of 2 or 3 people on a ballista, you actually have about 9 actions worth of things that crew can do to make that weapon ready to attack each round, using the rules that are in Saltmarsh about how fast it takes to reload a siege weapon. If you break that up amongst NPCs, you can then verbally command those NPCs to act, just like a druid could command a pack of wolves to move and attack, and then they'd also have reactions. So they all have the exact same action economy, except that you're consolidating all of those individual creatures' actions into the reload die, or the recharge die, like a breath weapon from a dragon. That's how those mechanics. Does that all make sense? That's a real fast dive dump, and it's kind of coffee driven. So maybe that's interesting enough that you'd want to read more about it when it comes out. So this is obscure. This is an obscure rule, but do you have any mechanical difference between interacting with an object and using an object in Starship Combat? Because Thief Rogue can use objects as bonus actions. Yeah, he could. He can use if your DM allows your characters to use character actions as ships. Like you may decide that a rogue sneak attack doesn't apply to a ship because it's not what the rogue is supposed to do. The system assumes that you're able to use all those action economy, but the DM can veto it if they want. A rogue can use an object interaction to move, because the only thing that the rogue can do as an object interaction is move the ship. But the rogue can also use the dash action as a bonus action. So you're either using an extra object interaction to move the ship, or you're using your bonus action to dash. Both of them equal movement. So object interaction is for free. You get 5 squares worth of movement, and whether you're dashing or using an object interaction as a rogue, it's still only an extra 5 squares worth of movement. So it's kind of like half a dozen or 6, take your pick, right? And it literally doesn't matter. So they're not cheating the system by being able to do that. They're just doing what rogues do. Rogues move a lot. They get free disengage. They get free dodge. Dodge translates into defend, and that dodge doesn't exist. Dodge should not exist in this game. Defending and like dodge gives too much advantage to, like, if you use the logic of dodge equals every attack against the ship and everyone aboard the ship is at disadvantage, we found having that hard coded into the system for everybody makes it drags out combat too long. But if you wanted to, as a rogue, use the dodge action, it technically doesn't exist as a ship. So you can't use the dodge action, but you can use disengage and you can use movement, because dodging just it's not a ship action. If your DM allows you to ignore that and make it, then that's the advantage of having a rogue. It will make combat longer, but also keeps your ship safer. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just it makes combat longer and your ship will take less damage because you're using the dodge action. But it's perfectly legal. You're totally welcome to do that. Just like a paladin can use smite through siege weapons, just like a barbarian can use reckless attack to have advantage against attacking the ship, and thus gains advantage on attacking. There you go. Sorry, words. But yeah, it all works if you want to. It's just you have to break up your action economy. So, but if you got any other questions, be welcome to shoot them at me. I'm happy to answer them. But I'm going to keep moving forward with art. But I love the questions. I'm glad you're interested enough to actually know what the answers are. That makes me feel good. Mixing maps and here we go. So all 3 scales of maps detailed above can be placed next to each other as depicted in the organized combat maps illustrated above, either on a gaming table or in play in person or within a VTT like Roll20. Conducting combat across multiple magnitudes of scale can mix using maps with theater of the mind. For example, since ranged weapons can attack any target up to 1 mile away, if there is only one target in an encounter, the 500-foot scale isn't necessary. The target either remains within range of combat or it doesn't, while the ships make ranged attacks against each other. If either chooses to close distance, then you can place them on a 50-foot scale map. Similarly, if a ship has enough movement to close from 500 to 5-foot scale during a ram attack to then board the target ship, the 50-foot scale map isn't necessary, and 2 ships can be placed on the 5-foot scale map. As another example, if the DM knows the crew of a target ship will surrender if it is boarded, when you successfully boarding team chooses to ignore the declaration of surrender and continue combat. Wait a second. If it is boarded, when you successfully grapple the target ship with ship melee weapons, you don't need to place the ship on the 5-foot scale map unless the boarding team chooses to ignore the declaration of surrender and continue combat. See, there you go. So changing scale with stationary targets, closing distance. Oh, okay, here we are. This is important. So closing distance, I need to make I need a map here, or like a little diagram to talk about changing scales with stationary targets. While traveling, so we have stationary targets, and then I believe on the next page we have changing scale with moving targets, because there's staying at relative distance during movement, and then there's absolute distance from each other while stationary. So these are topics that actually require separate addressing for you to have a sense of perspective on the map. So while traveling through the astral sea in wild space unimpeded is a passive activity similar to handling animals when traveling by wagon. The closer to an object a ship travels, the more the pilot must pay attention to the relative speed of the ship compared to those close objects. Otherwise, the ship may collide with them, as detailed in the collision section below. Closing distance. When closing distance with a stationary target, the pilot slows the speed of the ship to match the scale relative to the target. For example, when a pilot lands a craft on a stationary target, such as an asteroid base illustrated above at the 500-foot scale, the ship is moving at most 1 mile per round. As the ship moves closer, reducing distance from the asteroid to the 50-foot scale, the ship is moving at most 500 feet per round. As the ship moves even closer, reducing distance from the asteroid to the 5-foot scale, the ship is moving at most 50 feet per round. Finally, the ship can land on the surface of the asteroid, reducing speed to 0 feet per round. Opening distance. Similarly to closing distance, I'll catch your text here in a second. Similarly to closing distance with objects, as a pilot moves away from a target, speed increases with scale. For example, when a pilot disembarks aboard a craft from a stationary target, such as the asteroid base illustrated above, at the 5-foot scale, the ship is moving at most 50 feet. As the ship moves further away, increasing distance from the asteroid to the 50-foot scale, you can increase speed to 500 feet per round. As the ship moves even further away, increasing scale to the 500-foot scale, and you can similarly increase speed to 1 mile per round. So you're scaling in to be able to land, you're scaling up to take off. If the object is larger than you or stationary, then you're actually slowing your ship down so you can touch down and land safely. And you can change multiple scales per round if you make a piloting check. Otherwise, you automatically, every time you take the move action or dash action, you can reduce or increase scale without any difficulty. So during, like, a rogue could go from 500 feet to 50 feet to 5 feet to parked in one action by using interaction, object, and bonus action. Similarly, a rogue could lift off and then get out to the 500-foot scale of combat in one round using its action economy and just movement. Anyone could jump from 0 parked to 10,000 miles per round, but they'll have to make a DC 27 check to do so. If they don't, they'll have inertia shock and they'll stun themselves until they recover from it. Which in the larger picture doesn't really matter. You just hiccup while you try to take off and you look stupid. But in combat, it's important because if your ship stalls, you can't do anything to avoid attacks. So it's important that you not shock yourself during combat. So speeding up and slowing down too much becomes an interesting maneuver that you can jet away and drop back into within range of combat to kind of like yeet back and forth to be able to dodge in and out of combat when you're a high enough level to be able to reliably hit high DCs in your piloting check like a rogue could. Rogues are highly maneuverable pilot. Bards can be highly maneuverable pilots, which is why you might want them to be the pilot, even though your fighter would have like 5 attacks. 4 attacks using attacks and then a bonus action. If you want to engage in slow but steady combat, maybe you put your fighter on the helm. If you want to be a fast hitting pilot, then maybe you want to have the rogue. If you multi-class, you can potentially do both to a certain degree. But I need to drop in some maps here. So let's get to work on this here. Hey, more text. Playing a pilot character sounds like a lot of fun. Not necessarily as a weapon user. Well, the weapon user, the weapon user gets to, yeah, you get to fire multiple weapons. But if you're dealing at the 500-foot scale, you've got like 3 or 4 ships on you, and your pilot is engaging one ship, and there's other ships that are further away, then that siege weapon becomes useful. But you could also break up that economy between multiple. Like if you're a spellcaster, you could use your normal action to cast a spell, and then use your bonus action and reaction to help your team fire more weapons. The fighter could be at the weapon stand, but if you get boarded and now you're fighting stuff at the 5-foot scale, you could only have like 3 or 4 opponents board the ship. For the fighter specifically, manning the open deck crew to fight, keeping them from going under deck and killing your pilot. So the fighter, if you're taking on that siege role, you could potentially be breaking up your action economy between siege weapons to attack ships far away and to be attacking creatures on your deck, depending on how you want to break up your action economy. So, and then if you're doing squadrons, you have multiple ships that you can command at the same time, just like you can command multiple siege weapons. And you could break up your action between it. I could use one attack to have all my ships attack as a squadron, and have my my ballistas firing at the individual level if I'm dogfighting with an individual ship myself. So I could actually be in a cloud of multiple ships all fighting each other at the same time, while I'm dealing with my own target that's attempting to board me and dump crew onto my deck. So I can have actually all 3 of these things acting at the same time if I'm a commander that's commanding siege and squadrons. So, but the weapons basically do like D6 or D8 times 10 damage. And then you get to throw the proficiency die and try to stack up multiple weapons. It's actually a lot of fun. The playtesting team had a ton of fun using the reload dice to fire multiple weapons, because on fightercraft, you're both piloting and using your attack actions to either hit in melee combat or instead as ranged attacks, because the action economy is the same whether it's a melee attack or it's a ranged attack. So you can break up the actions that way, depending on what your character's rules are. So, yeah. Anyway, but yeah. Hold on, I just got a text. Yep. So let's see. We're talking about scaling in, scaling out. Square map here. We'll have this be 500-foot scale with your ship boarding here, and then I can have another map at the 50-foot scale, and then I can have your ship here. And a 5-foot scale. Have your ship here. I'll probably use actually a flittercraft or like just a fighter craft to be really small scale. I can have these here, and let's go take a look real quick. Open. Locks. Citadel of Light. There we go. Here's the map we made for Light of Xeraxis. What is this? The scale is image size 300 resolution. So this is a 500-foot square. I could then zoom in here. Oops, blocked. I can then break it down like this on this scale of a map. And then we can get ridiculously close. And have your ship parked like right here in the middle of town square. Have a fighter craft land right here. And then we scale out and scale out and scale out. That is the idea. This is one of the maps we provide with the book, so that if you're using the Light of Zaraxis adventure, you can use this 500-foot scale map. And then if you want to get closer to it, you can drop individual squares onto a VTT and zoom in closer to be able to work at these scales. So fun stuff. Gimme, thank you. Let's grab this here now. I'll depixelate that. There. Like that. Bop, bop, bop. Exactly. Yeah, but that's why you want to pace. You can use your reaction to pace a target. So if they're like dipping between like 500-foot scale to engage with you with ranged combat, and then yeeting up to like say 10 miles scale, so they're dipping in and out of range of combat. If you pace them, your pilot's going to be able to maintain that exact distance with each other, even though they're increasing and decreasing scale of movement. So like the disengage action allows you to get away from something safely in the 5-foot scale of combat. Pacing allows you to stay locked to that movement. They would have to use the disengage action to break away from pacing. So like if they use their bonus action to disengage, you can't pace them. But they're eating up action economy to do that. So they can't easily just yeet in and out of movement over and over again, because they have to use one of their actions to disengage, which actually makes a rogue really valuable to have at your helm, because they can use their bonus action to disengage, which gives them the freedom to be able to yeet in, pop, 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 and then fly back out again out of range. But then on your enemy's turn, they could just match speed with you and just catch up again. So you're only gaining temporary advantage unless you're engaging with multiple ships. But then if you're jumping in and out more than one scale during your action, like if I go from 10 miles to 500 feet back out to 10 miles, that's a 500 feet, 1 mile, 10 mile. That's 3 scales of magnitude. That's going to be a DC 22 and then a DC 23 check, because I keep changing my scale as I dip through combat. If I screw up my piloting check to be able to yank G's like that, jumping in and out of range, if I screw up my Constitution saving throw, I'm going to stall my ship. It's not a Constitution. It is a Constitution saving. Yes, it's a Constitution saving throw. If I screw up my check, I'll shock my pilot, and then you won't be able to. You'll be stunned for the round. So a rogue can move in and out of combat easily, but has the risk of being shocked in the process. So beep beep beep. There you go. There's the pros and cons to each class being in charge. Like the rogue can move in and out of scale faster because he has more actions to do it. But like a fighter might be able to survive the shock of moving multiple at once. So let's see. This is all you need for this page. And then here we have changing scale with moving targets as depicted in the illustrations below. When two ships are traveling between worlds at the same direction, placing them on a blank grid map, the squares can be any scale to depict general travel speed, but to attack each other, the distance between you and the target must be less than 1 mile. While traveling between worlds, movement on the map during combat doesn't represent changing speed. Instead, movement and changing scale represents how close you are to the target while maintaining the same relative speed, using the same 500, 50, and 5-foot scale scales detailed above. Pacing. When a target you are adjacent to attempts to move towards or away from you, you can use your reaction to stay at the same relative distance to the target on any scale of map. If the target is moving away from you, you can move with it, even if the target uses an action to move twice during its turn. If the target increases scale as part of moving away from you, you can increase scale as well. Place both of your ships and the target on the larger scale map in squares relative to your current positions, and if the target chooses, use any remaining movement at the new scale while you and the target remain at the same position on the scale of map that you're using to pace the target. Obviously, I'm going to need illustrations. So if a ship is increasing the scale of movement beyond your maximum speed, pacing automatically fails. For example, a minor spelljamming helm can move at maximum scale of 10-mile squares. It can't keep pace with a ship with a major spelljamming helm if the latter opens distance to the 100-mile scale. Above it explains that major helms have a 1,000-mile scale maximum, while minor helms have a 10-mile scale maximum. They're also less, the minor helms are slower, but they're less expensive. So like you can do trips from your planet to your moon and back within a day, but you can't travel between the stars, so it would take months. If you pace a target that attempts to increase more than one scale during movement, you must save against inertia shock to continue pacing if the target succeeds. If you're occupying the target's space and have aligned with it, its movement tows you, so you automatically pace the target without using a reaction while you remain aligned, unless it breaks alignment as described above. Risking inertia shock, as detailed above, changing scale during movement by more than one magnitude, requires a Constitution saving throw to resist inertia shock. If the save fails while closing distance with a stationary target, the drifting ship moves 10 squares at the initial scale while the helm is disabled. If during the next round the drifting distance is greater than the distance from the target, the ship collides with the object as described in the collision section below. Failing to save against inertia shock while changing scale relative to a moving target while opening distance with a stationary object causes the ship to drift for one round, but if there are no significant objects in the path of travel, there's no risk of collision. So you need to have a couple of different maps here to be able to depict different scales. And as we build the map, we always have the option of altering the text to more succinctly describe what's happening. So we have a map. And a target you are adjacent to moves towards or away from you. You can use your reaction to stay at the same relative distance to the target on any scale. That should be at. No, it is on any scale of map. On any scale of map, if the target is moving away from you, you can move. Actually, I think this should probably be a paragraph break. If the target is moving away from you, you can move with it, even if the target uses an action to move twice during its turn. Ship. That's why. Very small. How do we want to do this? Separate map. 50-foot scale. Separator. 2 ships. 500-foot scale. Ships. Maybe I need to see how I want to break this up. So we're here. It's easier just to be able to show motion, like in a video, just scooting tokens around. But still, a still map like this to be able to show that relative distance is a little trickier. So I'm thinking like, I have 2 ships here. This one attempts to move. This one also attempts to move. You got your map, right? And then here, like maybe if we do like here and here. Because it's all relative, just based on the scale that we have. Your ship is increasing the scale of movement beyond your maximum speed. Pacing automatically fails. There we go. That should be here. You can do that fade effect here again. Depict motion. This fade is really fucking important in being able to express movement. Here, cut, paste, hide. Watched Arrival again yesterday. I love that movie. It's on Netflix right now. I think it's on Netflix. Is that what we're watching? Yeah, it's on Netflix right now. Love that movie. This might work. .50 scale. I'll have to figure out how to graphic design, arrange all this stuff. Then we can. But we can safely occupy space this way. Yeah, I think we can probably get it. I think that'll probably do a good job expressing. I'll probably need to put in like little, like A and then B and then B and then C and then C. So I'll have to rearrange the text to be like, for example, C figure A, blah blah blah. Probably be able to break it down. So I'll have to go back and visit this again once we break this down. We can reword the text to be more descriptive using the squares that we have. So I think we should be fine there. And then let's go to, hey, 8 o'clock. I don't work today. It is a holiday, but I do need to take some medication for my leg infection. So give me a hot second here. Take some pills. Let's see, mixing stationary and moving targets. As detailed above, stationary targets are placed on the 500-foot scale map with any ships relevant to the encounter and act as points of reference for ship movement. In the illustration at the 500-foot scale map to the right, the asteroid base A is a stationary target. The defending fleet of Star Moths and Flittercraft B are the moving targets. The ship movement at the 500-foot scale is relative to the asteroid base. When you close distance with a ship to the 50-foot scale, movement at the 50-foot scale each round is relative only to the target ship, C. If you interact with both stationary and moving targets simultaneously in combat, you can interact with both stationary and moving targets simultaneously in combat. While pacing a target at the 5 and 50-foot scale, when the target moves at a larger scale, you move with the target, D. So actually that's what we were pretty much depicting in the last illustration. That's interesting. I might be able to... No. Beep. Asteroid base. B. When you close distance with the ship at the 50-foot scale, let's go M2. Movement at the 50-foot scale each round is relative only to the target ships. Ship to 50-foot scale. Movement at the 50-foot scale each round is relative only to the target ship. C. While pacing a target at the 5 and 50-foot scale, when the target moves at a larger scale, you move with the target. I feel like a vessel with a major spelljamming helm has a maximum movement scale of 1,000 miles per square. During combat, while a craft with a minor spelljamming helm has a maximum movement scale of 10 miles per square. A craft can pace a vessel until the vessel increases speed beyond 10 mile squares. The minor helm simply cannot match the vessel's greater scale of movement. A major helm, however, allows for far greater speeds and can easily pace craft and most creatures. However, if two ships or creatures have the same maximum scale of movement, one cannot simply increase scale to outpace the other. Instead, you participate in a pursuit. During a pursuit, creatures moving independently make opposed dexterity checks, and the pilot of a ship makes opposed pilot checks, as detailed in the pilot rule section below. If the pursuer succeeds, place both on a 500-foot scale map, 5 squares apart, and roll initiative to begin combat. The pursuer rolls with advantage. If the winner of the contest wants to evade the other, then the other cannot attempt to close distance for 1 minute. After 1 minute, the pursuer can make another check with disadvantage against the evading target's passive pilot DC, or if pursuing a creature, against DC 8 plus its proficiency bonus plus dexterity or constitution modifier, whichever is higher. If the second, because creatures, like some creatures can fly as fast as spelljamming helms, depending on their unnatural nature, which is described in the creature menagerie below. If the second check fails, the pursuer loses evading target, although I could technically eliminate talking about creatures here and just address that creatures, because we already addressed in the creatures menagerie section that they are all capable of moving at these speeds and what that means. I could potentially simplify the language here to reduce the amount of clutter to help keep a clean signal on what's being expressed. But it is important to express, I don't know, I'll think about that. After 1 minute, the pursuer can make another check with disadvantage against the evading pilot's passive pilot DC. And if the second check fails, the pursuer loses the evading target. See Void Tracking section below for details about tracking beyond visual range. If the pursuer succeeds the first or second check, they close within 1 mile at the 500-foot scale, and the two participants roll initiative. The pursuer rolls with advantage. one craft here and one craft here at 10-mile scale. And then I could have here. This is a little redundant because we've kind of shown these graphics already. Maybe showing them again isn't a bad idea, though. I don't know. We'll have to think about it. To be perfectly honest, we wrote the book before we did the illustrations. We didn't make the book with the illustrations. So depending on how these illustrations go, we might want to rewrite these sections to potentially simplify things. So it's easier to understand what it is we have here. Minor helm, major helm, 10-mile scale, these two things can move at the same speeds. 100-mile scales, they can't move at the same speeds. Like maybe we need like little caption blurbs. So we could potentially like have this span across the space of the page as a single column, and then like position these to be larger to take up the space here, so that we're breaking off thoughts, like we're breaking up chunks of text to move with the pictures. Similarly, I could take this chapter, like this chunk of text here talking about this mechanic, and move it off into its own little space with its own square. Like since we have two columns, since we only need to use one column here, I could potentially like break this up and this up and this up into like one space here, one space here, one space here, and have the map corresponding with those blocks of text, kind of like we did a couple pages back with the landing and taking off. That might help consolidate to separate each thought from each other, instead of it being a larger flow of conscience walking through the entire process in one go, and then having you bounce back and forth to see what's going on with the text. We could instead break up the blocks of text to work with the squares, so that each complete thought, it has its own visual reference, and then we move on to the next step and next thought to show how that might actually be the better way of doing that. So I'm probably gonna have to spend some time off screen fucking around with the text and the boxes at the same time. This is the one instance where I acknowledged using Adobe's InDesign as a layout program would be easier, because I would be able to adjust the text in column with the image assets already loaded in from Photoshop. And as I update the text, I could then bounce into Photoshop, update it, hit the bridge button, and it would automatically upload the new image in Photoshop into InDesign. Up until this stage over the past few years, this is the first instance where if it would be great to be able to adapt the text and then hit an update button, have both the text and the images recalibrate themselves on the page. That is a strength that Adobe products have when you're bridging them together. I understand, I think Affinity also has the ability to do art bridging like that, but we're gonna have to mud it and just use screenshots, like when we come in here and we modify the text that we're doing here, and then we drop like here. If we drop in here, I can rearrange the text here. I would then be able to take a screenshot here and then go back into the document and then drop the pacing here, and then take these maps and then drop them underneath there, and then drop them underneath that section. So I would be able to, that's almost on the fly. It's close enough. It's just doing it backwards. So, but that can work. So yeah, I think we're gonna have to spend some time rebuild. Now that I know how this stuff is actually visualizing, I think what I need to do is go back in and rewrite this text so it's referencing the actual images that are being dropped on page. I'm excited about that, because I can see how this is difficult to follow a flow of conscience. I mean, all the steps are there, but I think I need to break it up so it's more easy to grok by having those maps informing each section. That's good. I'm excited about it. It's going to slow our production down a little bit, but That's okay. That's what we need to do to make the product work, and that's what has to be done. And we didn't know it until we actually started building the page. So I'm actually really excited about that. This is how we design RPGs. So let's look at additional ship maneuvering. In addition to the general rules of movement and scale detailed above, pilots can perform various special maneuvers, aligning gravity planes. If the ship you're piloting is adjacent to or occupying space within the gravity plane of a target that you touch or hit with a ship melee attack, you can choose to align your gravity plane with the target. If your ship can fully occupy space within the target's gravity plane, any movement the target takes tows you at your current position relative to it at the 5 and 50 foot scale, unless the target uses the disengage action to break alignment before moving. If the ship is adjacent to or only partially occupying the target's gravity plane, movement that separates the two planes also breaks alignment. So that sounds, I think I need to break this up too. So let's look at what this is doing. So here at the 50 foot scale, I've got a ship that's occupying this space, and then I need to do this differently. Ship. And then ship. So we have one ship here. And then we have one ship here. They're occupying the same space. How do I want to... If your ship can fully occupy the space within the target's gravity plane, A, any movement the ship takes tows you at the current position. So what I need to do is have circle and circle. Actually need circle and circle, A and B. Circle and circle, A and B, B. Here, C. Separates the two planes, also breaks alignment. So we have these two maps. I'm pretty good with those. That goes down to a smaller scale. This needs to be a break here. So we can actually take this chunk of text and move it down to here to interact with this map, and then have this portion of this map move up to here to be a separate thought. So if the ship you're piloting is adjacent to or occupying space within the gravity plane of a target that you can touch or hit with a ship melee attack, you can choose to align your gravity plane with the target. Down. How do I want to visualize that? Let's see. This is the way. This is the right way. ship you're piloting is adjacent to or occupying space within the gravity plane of a target that you touch or hit with a weapon attack. You can choose to align your gravity plane with the target. Ship. C. V for vessel, C for ship, occupies the same space. Occupying space within the... Ship. How do I want to do that? Boat. Fighter craft. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't want to. There's no reason for me to, while I'm doing composition. All I'm trying to do is see how space needs to be filled and how the objects will exist inside of that space that we carve out. Whether it's a two-dimensional overhead grid or it's an actual illustration. It's just a matter of what space can I afford on the page to open up to provide that. But yeah, it's all shit in the beginning, and God willing, as we continue through the effort, it evolves into something that creates a distinct visual package. So, but yeah, thanks. It is fun. That's the fun challenge. Illustration is a problem-solving task. You're attempting to take words and convert them into images so that the eye can embellish that narrative. Like the text is explaining how the things work, but having illustrations of ships interacting with each other lets the brain imagine how that would actually be, like in theater of the mind, like how that would cinematically look. So having a mix of both grid and ships interacting with each other, on a token tactical level, as well as in a three-dimensional illustration narrative style, those two things working together help your brain grok what it is that the map is depicting. How does that get expressed in actual like theater of the mind combat? How do you narrate and visualize that? That's what we're attempting to do using completely new movement mechanics, as close to a 5e style of play as possible. So aligning gravity planes, I'm trying to like I could technically have this grid next to an illustration here to be able to show how these two things are actually, that might actually be a lot of fun. It's taking the tactical map and then doing a little spot illustration to show what these two things mean to each other. And then this breaks, so I have M1, this will be M1, and then M2, and then M3. M2, and then M3. But yeah, I'm gonna have to break up this text as well. I'm kind of liking this, breaking these into smaller and smaller chunks. So like each piece of information has its own visual to it, so that we're just breaking it down to like the very, very simple steps, so that if folks don't have the benefit of having me push tokens around on a virtual tabletop, once we get done with this, I'll start like showing how to do all this stuff on the virtual tabletop in Roll20 that we use, so I can actually like take each page and like show you how this stuff works on the table. But if you don't plug, if you don't plug into the videos, it's showing the movement, the map the images themselves and the text and the pages have to be able to express that stuff without the benefit of having motion pictures actually show you how those tokens are moving. That's why we have to use like this faded arrow language to show ships moving from one space to another, to be able to get that sense of time lapse with movement to be able to express this stuff. So opportunity attacks. When a ship attempts to move out of your melee weapon range, you can use a reaction to make an opportunity attack against it, unless it first takes the disengage action as described in the ship rules section below. This includes movement at the current map scale, or if the target increases the map scale before movement. When you hit with an opportunity attack, you can choose to align gravity planes as detailed above. If you hit with a grappling weapon, you can choose to grapple as detailed in the grappling section below, potentially ending the target's movement while remaining within reach of your melee attacks. Maybe that means I should actually have opportunity attacks listed before pacing, before aligning gravity planes. Because like if an opportunity attack is going to allow, that actually makes sense. I should actually depict opportunity attacks first before aligning gravity planes, because the result of hitting something, grappling, or simply touching the ship is what aligns the gravity planes. So I should have opportunity first and then explain what aligning gravity planes is. When you hit with an opportunity attack, you can choose to align gravity planes as detailed above, which would then become as detailed below. And then I can move all this up here. I can then take this aligning gravity planes and push it down. I have it alphabetical here, which is how I originally laid it out, because these are additional ship maneuvers. This is how you would alphabetically list them: aligning planes, opportunity attacks, and then surging. But I think in this instance, yeah, I think opportunity attacks first actually makes more sense. It's a shame I can't talk about grappling before I talk about opportunity attacks and aligning, but opportunity attacks, aligning, and surging are basic movement mechanics, and grappling is a special melee attack. So the melee attack should be in the melee section. I can't have attacks before movement because logic. You have to understand how movement works to be able to determine if you're within range of attacks at all at first. So describing how movement happens and then describe how weapons interact with that movement, that is the proper way. But it does become self-referential. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's look at surging and see how, because if we rearrange this, I can push the opportunity attacks up to here. I can then have a space here showing opportunity attacks while ships attempt to leave space with each other, grappling, and then we can depict aligning gravity planes further down with ships grappling or sitting inside. Because if you grapple, you don't have to be inside of the, you don't have to completely occupy the other ship's space to be carried by it. But if, but a fighter craft can just get inside your space and then automatically align with your plane if you choose, and then that fighter ship is sitting inside your gravity well. So regardless of where you move, you're going to carry the fighter craft with you. So surging, surging refers to moving in combat at a speed greater than the scale of squares on the current map. You can move up to 10 squares in a straight line on the current scale, as though moving only one square at the next larger scale of magnitude. At the 5-foot scale, surging counts as one square of movement at the 50-foot scale. I should probably actually add to the surging. Moves 10 squares while only counting as one square of movement at the 50-foot scale. At the 50-foot scale, surging counts as one square of movement at the 500-foot scale, and then I would be able to duplicate this and then duplicate this. At the 500-foot scale, surging counts as 1 square of movement at the 1 mile scale. Since you can move so much faster than the maximum scale of combat, combat ends basically at the 500-foot scale because you're too far away to shoot at each other. But you can move 1 mile, 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles per square during movement and still have a 6-second action economy. So it's realistic that you can move at a faster scale than what you're depicting on the map if you choose to just increase your scale of movement. But if you don't increase the scale of map with it, you're now moving 10 squares on your current at your local map level, even though you're actually moving at a scale 10 times faster than that. You're only making 1 square worth of movement at the 500-foot scale, even though you're moving 10 squares at the 50-foot scale. And if you do that, you can't change direction during that movement. It has to be in a straight line as though you're charging. But you could charge 500 feet of movement at the 5-foot scale and completely close the gap during dogfighting with 1 square while surging. So each instance of surging counts as 1 scale of magnitude during movement when risking inertia shock, because you're changing your scale of movement, you're speeding up, you're surging forward, which causes inertia, which can potentially cause inertia shock. You get 1 scale of movement for free every time you take the move action as an object interaction or as a dash. So if you have movement, if you use interaction to steer the ship, and then a dash action, you can change scale twice, either up or down. Like I can surge forward at 500 feet and then slow my scale again to 50 feet to be able to jump past some ships to get to a target behind them perhaps, and then reduce scale so I can engage that ship directly. For example, at the 50-foot scale, you can use 1 square of movement to surge forward in any direction up to 500 feet with no risk. If you then use another square of movement to surge forward in any other direction up to an additional 500 feet, you must make a Constitution saving throw, DC 21, to avoid inertia shock. B. If you then use a 3rd square, because you get 5 squares of movement, right? So you could then use a 3rd square of movement to surge forward in any direction up to an additional 500 feet, 10 squares. C. You must make another Constitution check, now DC 22. If you have 2 squares that remain as part of this movement action, which can be used to surge again, DC 23, D, and again finally DC 24, E. Surging also allows you to make a ram attack against a target that is closer than the distance listed to the ram attack section below. That's clunky. I need to rework that. But you have to move. A vessel has to move 500 feet, and a fighter craft has to move 50 feet to be able to ram. So at these different scales, that can count as 1 square of movement. But if you're less than 500, like you can move up to 10 squares, but it can be less than that. Let's see. You can move up to 10 squares of in a straight line on the current scale, as though moving only 1 square, the next largest. So you could surge forward 1 square, but you wouldn't need to surge. If you want to hit a target that's, say, 12 squares away at the 50-foot scale, instead of using a movement and then a dash action at that scale, you could instead choose to surge forward 12 squares using 2 squares of movement at the next higher scale, like at the 500-foot scale. 1 square, 2 squares, and then you close that distance. You could choose to move like 6 squares and 6 squares, or you can choose to move 10 squares and then 2 squares, both as surges. But they can only be in straight lines. So, like if I were to weave around like this, I'd have to use like 1 square, 1 square, 1 square, 1 square, 1 square, 1 square, 1 square. And at the 50-foot scale, if they're all at the same scale, then that's just me moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. Here and here. Or if these were like, these could also be like 4 squares, like, 200 feet, and then 200, and then 200, and then 200, and then 200. These could all be surges. 1 surge, 2 surge, 3 surge, 4 surge, 5 surge. But I'd be making inertia shock checks as I continue to see the scale of movement here is very tight, fast movement. So you're whipping your ship around, gaining inertia and mass as you do that, which causes the inertia checks. the inertia shock checks to make sure you don't stun yourself temporarily from, concussing your brain from pulling multiple G's. That's the thought process there. But now I have to start breaking this stuff up, like A, B, C, D, E. So we have here. So I could actually break this up here into M2. And this could be M2. So I could take this chunk and push that down. And then have another chunk of map here. So how would I depict that? I think this is going to work. It's going to take a little bit of effort for me to break up the text and rewrite it so that it's speaking to the specific to the specific diagram on each. But I think we can pull that off. So, boy oh boy, this is why we get paid the big bucks. Okay, so we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maps on a page. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specific chunks of text that we're talking about, and we can break them up. Opportunity attack, and then M1, and then M2, 3 here, and then M4 here with map, and then M5 down here. So we'll have to break up all that language. I think that's going to be okay. And now we're looking at ship rolls. Where are we at? Oh, my mic moved away. Maybe this sounds better now. Text. Sorry, missed that. So I think I know the answer. But will the system of Spelljammer have a narrative story to it, or will it just be the system of running Spelljammer storylines? There's 2 appendices. So there's the actual core mechanics. And then Appendix 1 is a random system generator using these mechanics, the exploration mechanics, so you can build your own wild space systems with all sorts of anomalies to create a hex crawl sort of environment. The second appendix is a 20-page conversion guide for Light of Xeraxis. The Light of Xeraxis is the 68-page adventure that is officially published, that's part of the box set of the Spelljammer's Adventures in Space that Wizards provided. Our second appendix is a conversion guide using these mechanics to play Light of Xeraxis using all of these ship combat rules. And there's multiple, like there's a Nyogi fight. There's multiple starship fights. There's a space pirate fight. There's a shark hunt. And then there's the assault on the Citadel of Light at the end of the adventure. So there's like 5 different combat encounters that would be able to use these mechanics specifically as set pieces that are already built into Light of Xeraxis. And then there's also the scaling and the exploration of being able to find things. Moving through astral space and like how long time takes to move through the astral sea to get from one system to another, and then there's all the detection stuff and like dealing with like the vampirates, as well as the Rieger that you have to fight. If you don't know the adventure, it won't make much sense to you. But the appendix of the last 20 pages of this book are, here's how you convert all these different encounters that are in that 68-page adventure. We spend 20 pages breaking down all the mechanics of what's inside of each of those encounters so that you can run them using this system instead of ignoring ship combat and just going to deck 5-foot scale. Like in the Light of Xeraxis, they have you in each of those combats. They have you at the 5-foot scale on deck fighting other creatures that are on board your deck. So every combat is the same. You get attacked by a ship, they close distance and board your ship. So you basically have 5 fights in the exact same map. It's just the only thing that changes are the enemies. So using this, you can continue to have that 5-foot scale combat where enemies are boarding your ship, but we're now providing rules that would prevent them from being able to get aboard your ship in the first place, trying to dodge them, or you aggressively go after their ship and board aboard their deck instead and attack them and take their ship over. So you have those. This is allowing you to make that choice. Do I want to try to take out these targets in ship combat, or are they going to be able to close distance and try to capture our ship? Because the enemies in Light of Xeraxis are always being depicted as attempting to capture your ship, either to arrest you and interrogate you if you're the elves, to enslave your crew if it's the Theurgy. Only the vampire, the Rieger, they try to close distance and kill your crew aboard the ship. So each of the combats that are depicted in Light of Xeraxis is always, we want to close distance and board your ship. And the one encounter that doesn't, the fleet combat with the Citadel, they don't want you to deal with the fleet at all. They suggest that you just sidestep the entire fleet combat as a backdrop and have like an enemy ship target, like an enemy ship and a dragon target your ship specifically, again, boarding your ship and attacking your ship one-on-one at the 5-foot scale, while there's like 60 ships in combat all around you. But the way that LOX is designed is you don't deal with the fleet. It's just a backdrop that you ignore. But the way that we had play tested it is that you can actually have your fleet of 30 ships attacking the fleet of 30 ships that are defending the Citadel. And if you can break through those defenses, you can then attack the Citadel directly, which has its own turrets for defense. So you can continue fighting at the 500-foot scale. And the goal there is to carve out a clean spot of weapons for you to be able to safely land your ship, disembark, and then go attack the Citadel. Or you could also instead actively attack the Citadel with your ships. There's also the option of dragging an asteroid and throw it and smash into the Citadel of Light using our massive object collision rules, so that you could then effectively hit the Citadel with a moon, basically. So you have those different things that you can do, dealing different amounts of damage. All you have to really do is destroy the Citadel temple. If you can destroy the temple, it cuts the connection off from the star that powers the entire facility. Or you could take it over and make it your own. Or you could land and negotiate peace if you have, if your fleet can overwhelm their fleet, and now you have superiority in the sky superiority, and you could eventually just smash the entire Citadel. You could hold it hostage and sue for peace, having them end. The whole thing is like your planet's being destroyed by this ritual process that the Xeraxans use to power their sun. If you capture their Citadel and ransom for peace, you can force them to end that ritual so that your planet is saved, thus dooming their star to die. But fuck you, you're terrorists. I don't care if you have a good reason to do that. It's not good enough to destroy another planet. So it's like, it's either your planet or ours, so we're going to force you to end this. And then you cut off the power supply. You could then take the Citadel hostage, or like make it your own and use that as a base of operations if you want. You could hook up a series of helms to be able to then use that 1 mile asteroid as a floating base and move it to other systems and wage your own war against orcs if you want to, or whatever. Anyway, that's the idea behind that. Hopefully that answers your question, but yeah, it provides practical examples of how this stuff would be used, using the adventure that Wizards wrote themselves. Like, here's how you can use these combat mechanics in their own adventure to be able to make that the Light of Xeraxis more in depth, more planes of interaction at these larger scales. Ship rolls. I'm not sure what kind of illustration I want to have here, but we have abundant space here at the bottom of the page to be able to do like an actual illustration. Yeah, like 4 pages. Like we had like 4 pages of hard tech. There's a lot of pages of tech. That's more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8 pages worth of diagrams and maps that we did. it's time for us to do some actual illustrations. So not sure what I want to have depicted down here though. It's a book about this is a page about ship rules. So like I don't know what we want to do. Like we can have somebody on a helm here. Have like a ship crew here. The spiraling fighter craft is a 40-foot ship, and then there's these little skiffs that are like 15 foot, like half the size. They have smaller mounted weapons that deal less damage versus like this gunship over here is like a PT boat. It's got a ballista on it and it has 2 mounted weapons, so it's like and plus it's got all these spiderling legs that act as rams. I want to push that spider into the background. We can do like that. Yeah, and then blow this up in size. It's actually pretty fun. Keeping them focused on the characters. Being chased after by these Yogi ships. That's really fucking fun. Yeah, I am super down with that. That's fun. Let's get this one. We could squeeze in something here on the bottom, but having some resting space isn't a bad idea. So I don't feel like I have to. Like this border here is going to have navigation symbols moving from one chapter to another by clicking on the icon, whatever chapter that is. So we only have like this little gap here. Pilot rolls, pilot checks. Bruh. Any actions of pilot containing requires a pilot check action. 10 plus your pilot ability modifier plus your proficiency score, and your pilot ability score can be Constitution, Dexterity, Intelligence, or Wisdom. Pilots making skill checks, making checks and saves while focusing. A pilot uses their own ability modifiers when the ship is targeted by an effect, unless the ship material provides a higher bonus, as described above. If so, use that instead. If both you and the ship can be targeted by an effect that requires a saving throw, roll once. If the save is successful, both you and the ship are considered to have succeeded. Likewise, if the ship fails, both fail. See the spellcasting section below for more details on saving throws. Taking damage for the ship. When a ship takes damage, you can choose to use the pilot's hit points to shield the ship from taking some or all of the damage dealt to it. While focusing and not surprised, choose how much damage to take for the ship. Damage taken this way can be reduced by any resistances and other effects such as warding bond spell that can be healed as normal. Taking damage for the ship forces you to make a Constitution saving throw to maintain focus and concentration if maintaining a spell, using the normal rules of concentration. You cannot reduce your hit points below 0 this way. Subtract any remaining damage from the ship's damage reduction score. Any remaining damage is taken by the ship up to its current hit points. You know what? I should actually provide an example. Like, for example, if 60 from ballista would hit your ship, let's do it like this. I mean, this is just a sketch, but we're okay. Let's get this off of here. There. Let's do an example, just offhand. So let's say Wasp equals 140 hit points with a damage reduction of 15. Ballista equals 50 HP, 50 damage. Pilot equals 20 damage. Ship DR equals 15. Ship equals 15. 125. Down. Pilot equals, say, 65 hit points. like a fifth level character, like a fifth level fighter or barbarian. Pilot equals 65. Pilot 20 equals 45 HP. HC left. Heal pilot. There you go. So you can spend, so you would be conducting battle like normal. If your character's really low level, the ship can be soaking the damage instead of your pilot. But as you gain levels, your pilot has a larger and larger hit point pool. You can use your hit points to prevent the ship from taking damage, and then you can have your cleric aboard the ship spend a spell to heal the pilot. So you're effectively eliminating damage to the ship by using the damage resistance of the ship, and by taking damage and then recovering that with heal spells or warding bond, or if a barbarian is raging and has damage reduction, then if you take 20 points of damage, the pilot could be using damage reduction to reduce that to only 10. So instead of 65, the barbarian would have 55. A rogue could use cunning action to use a reaction to eliminate damage from an attack if you wanted to. Or you can just take the damage and then have like warding bond on your character, so that instead of taking 20 damage, you take 10 damage and the cleric takes 10 damage. And since your damage reduction, warding bond causes damage reduction, that 10 damage would then only be 5 damage that you're actually taking. And then the cleric takes 10, so it becomes minuscule amounts. But if you start taking multiple shots per round, and like say you have 3 ballistas that do like 120 damage, that's going to trash your wasp ship really fast. And it's going to be a fuck ton of damage that your pilot would have to eat. So like if you're going to be doing multiple shots like that, like this is how you can scale up damage as you gain levels and move up into higher levels of character. You can continue to threaten your ships by having like multiple ships firing weapons together, or have one gunboat firing multiple weapons on its ship at the same time, targeting you, dealing larger and larger scales of damage that your characters are able to absorb more and more hits from. Because of the way that 5e combat works, characters gain more hit points as they gain levels, and you get more resources to heal or revive or raise dead, stuff like that. So it still has the same damage economy and eating your character's resources. It's just now that you're all on the same ship, so the pilot is taking hits. So if you have a character that can minimize damage, like a barbarian or a rogue that can use their character actions to mitigate damage, then having them in combat as a pilot makes a lot of sense. So in this system, having the martial characters being pilots makes more and more sense, because they can soak more and more damage and have more means of mitigating that damage. And then having other supporting characters that can cast spells to support the pilot, or to use their action economy to be able to fire siege melee weapons in like as bonus actions and reactions, while using their normal action economy to cast spells to help buff the pilot or other crew members, or to buff weapon attacks that they're making. Pilot idea. Don't know the system perfectly, but pilot as Rogue 7, Barbarian 2 can rage to take half. Yes. Could use uncanny dodge as a reaction. Yes. And can move the bonus action Rogue sneak attack. If you're going to allow sneak attack, yes. And sneak attack, like it would be like you could use as a ram attack, like say your ram is going to do like say D8 times 10 damage, like say slashing damage, because it's a slashing ram. It's just a giant blade on the front of your ship. The sneak attack damage doesn't get multiplied. It would be D8 times 10 plus, like say, Rogue 7, that'd be 46. So it'd be D8 times 10 plus the extra 4d6. It doesn't sound like a lot, but considering you can do it every round, it does add. It's like basically an extra ballista attack. So it does make a difference. But the damage on spells and creature abilities don't scale up in damage, because it gets absurd when like if the rogue were to do like 46 times 10 damage, that's like an extra 120 damage on a hit. That's the amount of hit points that a ship has. So you're basically one-shotting ships if you upscale the damage of spells, and and creature effects. So you really can't upscale them that way and still remain within curve. But it does cause your pilot to take more damage because the pilot's going to have to continue eating damage for the ship to keep the ship from being destroyed. So at some point, there's this point where that smaller weapon damage does add up over time. We saw that again and again, and especially like with fighter craft that like might only have like a fighter ship, like a 20-foot fighter ship is only going to have like 40 hit points. It can't take shit. If you're going to be flying around fire pilots fighting vessels like at large scale starships, like launching multiple catapults at your little fighter craft, you're going to want to be high level so you can soak all that damage. But at the larger scale, vessels keep your character safe. 2 million damage! But yes, you're absolutely reading that correctly. You could build a multi-class character, rogue, barbarian like that, to be raging, taking the lesser damage while you're doing it, and use your uncanny dodge as a reaction to be able to dodge out of that stuff. That would be a great combat pilot that's using a mix of both maneuverability and durability to be able to weather all those hits. That's a great build. That's a great build. It gives you great reason to be able to multi-class into stuff like that. A barbarian that crits using brutal attack, instead of doing D8 times 10, could be doing like say 3D8 times 10 damage on a random attack, because that would be adding multiple dice to the attack. So, but at that point, your barbarian's like 11th to 17th level, and you could be realistically fighting multiple ships at the same time because your team is capable of dealing out enough damage to wear them down and can take enough damage to weather the hits from multiple ships during a round. So it scales up in CR just like the characters would scale up fighting multiple giants. Like one giant might be a fight at 4th level, but at like 12th level, it's going to take like 6 giants to challenge your team. Giants are effectively ships. So it's the same kind of hit point spread and the same type of damage. It's just that you can use your ship to shield some of that damage if you want. Or by the time you get to 12th level, like you have 150 hit points. If you're shaving 15, like 10 to 20, depending on the material, light wood is 10 points. Medium materials, like metal is 20 hit points of damage reduction. Light material, like light wood, is 10 points. And then you can have a hybrid, like a mix of like bone, for instance, or like a mix of metal and wood is like a composite material that has a damage reduction of 15. Each attack is being whittled down 15 points, but if each attack is doing like 30 to 80 points of damage per hit, that translates to 15 to 65 damage. And that's a decent round of combat for a character to take, like at 10th level. And then you have your cleric, again, backing them up, dumping heal spells on top of them, and helping the ballista team load and fire weapons. So the spellcaster can be doing double duty with their action economy. Instead of just sitting there casting a spell, they can be helping the siege crew fire more often by using their bonus action and their reaction to load and reload and fire weapons alongside other characters on the crew. So you have like a ranger, for instance, firing siege weapons with the cleric backing them up, has multiple shots, reloads, and can use their actions, like bonus actions, like use Hunter Mark to target an enemy ship so they can get an advantage on attacking them, for instance. You have these different options that you can weigh in. Yeah, anyway. So that's the ideas behind that. But having a little brief example down here would make a lot of sense. And then we have action economy damage within an area of effect. If a ship was within an area of effect that deals damage, a pilot without total cover from the effect is affected as normal. If you take damage and choose to take damage for the ship from the same effect, the Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration and focus is determined by the sum of damage taken. For example, a skiff is a craft with a damage resistance of 5 that doesn't provide total cover for the pilot. If the ship is within the effect area of a fireball that deals 28 damage, you must make a dexterity saving throw as normal. If the save fails, you take 28 damage. Save fails. That's a typo. Let's fix our life. Take 28 damage and can choose to take up to 18 damage for the ship. The sum of damage is up to the fireball. If the save fails, you take 23 damage and can choose to take up to 18 damage. This is the typo. Fireball, it deals 23 damage. That's where the typo is. Within the area of the fireball, it deals 23 damage. You must make a dexterity saving throw as normal. If the save fails, you take 23 damage and can choose to take up to 18 damage for the ship. The sum of the damage is 41, and the Constitution saving throw DC to maintain focus is 21. If instead you take no damage for the ship, the DC is 12. Half of, you round down, so that should actually be 20. If instead you take no damage for the ship, the DC is 12, because a half of 23 is 22. That should actually be 11. No, wait, saves round up. Definitely not the main damage dealer as a pilot, but really good at soaking up damage while being able to maneuver well. Yeah, exactly. And the damage doesn't exist. Also, you're a god at dex saves as well. Exactly. So it's in the original Spelljammer book that Wizards published, you have to be a spellcaster, and all you basically do is just sit on the helm and do nothing else. Your spellcaster is completely shut down somewhere inside the deck of the ship, unable to help the rest of the team, while the rest of your team is attempting to use like 3 actions per round to load a ballista and fire at once, and it takes 30 rounds at 1,000. Like the closing distance in Spelljammer book is recommended to start at 1,000 feet, and you only move 30 feet per round in a ship. So it literally takes 30 rounds to move from I see a ship to closing distance to then board. And during those 30 rounds, you have to eat like 2 rounds of actions to fire the weapon once. So you have basically 15 attacks at each other, and that's literally it. And you can attempt to escape if you want, and there's no rules for escaping combat. You have to literally outrun them. But if both of the ships move 30 feet per round, you can never outpace your opponent because you can't move more than 30 feet. So there's a big frustration about these mechanics that Wizards provided are insufficient for us to be able to actually engage in combat. Because if I can only move 30 feet, I choose to move away 30 feet, and you try to close distance 30 feet, you're always staying 1,000 feet away from each other. So you will just basically be able to attack forever until you run out of ammunition. And you're only making 1 attack every other round because of the way that action economy works according to Wizards of the Coast. So we had to build all these mechanics to allow you to be able to close distance, to engage at the scale that you want to, and to be able to make multiple attacks per round so that combat feels like a normal, like as though you're on horseback, firing bows, or like attacking with lances, or have a sword in hand, or you're casting a spell. It feels more like everyone's riding a horse. It's just the horse is 250 feet in size, and everyone's riding the same horse. One character has the reins, but can still cast a spell or make attacks while you're guiding the horse using normal 5e mechanics. It's just the horse is massive. And there's multiple weapons on the back of the horse that each character can choose to use to fire. It's exactly the same. It's just the scale is ridiculously large. And because the scale is so large, and that the scale exists at the same time as the 5-foot scale, you could at any time have your horse run up with the other one, and everyone can jump off the back of each other. So you have to be able to operate both at the 500-foot, 50-foot, and 5-foot scale all at the same time to be able to properly have your characters engaging at all these different scales. Even though all the action economy is the same because of the way that group activities work, you have all these NPC crewmen that are loading using their action economy, using the reload die to be able to fire potentially multiple times per round, even though it takes multiple actions to be able to load and fire a weapon. If you have 4 or 5 guys that are loading a weapon, turning the weapon, then firing the weapon, you can potentially fire more than once per round, as dictated by the reload die. The higher level your character gets, the larger their reload die gets, the easier it is for them to fire one weapon at a time, or they can stack and add all the reload scores together to potentially fire multiple weapons more than once per round. And if they botch that, then they can just start eating their economy to reload all the weapons again to line up another volley of shots. Or you can just break it down into individual actions, depending on how you want to use your action economy. Wait, Swashbuckler, you could get sneak and melee, and then and they can't protect opportunity attacks against you. Obviously, got to ask the DM if they allowed it. But yes, the system is allowed to do that. It's designed to do that if you want to. And by capping the damage that like sneak attacks, smite, and other things like that will do to the ships, you can allow your characters to use your stuff without completely obliterating each other in one shots. So it all works together and has a purpose for each other. But yeah, absolutely you can do that. You can absolutely do that, and it makes it super fucking fun. Now, one of our playtests, everyone were on little fight. One of our playtests, we had 2 fighter ships, like little fighter craft, fighting a 200-foot purple worm. So they had to fly through tunnels, a 50-foot scale tunnels, to get into where this worm is at and attack the worm. It basically became like it was like a Metroid battle. It was actually a side scroller because you can move at the 50-foot scale. Since you have infinite movement, you can actually have a side scroll dungeon where the tunnels are just 50 feet wide, and if you disembark from your ship, you can then reorient your map so that you're looking overhead with your characters walking along the ground. But if you're on your craft, you can then pick up, and instead of having overhead movement like Galaga, you can instead have it a side scroller like Life Force or Defender, or like Sonic the Hedgehog. It's a side scroller, so you can do both overhead scroll like Raiden and Galaga, or you could do a side scroll like Life Force and Defender. Moon Patrol, all these old school 80s arcade games, they all have side scroll or top scroll methods, and we can use both of those styles of maps. In our playtesting, we did both of them. So once I publish this thing, we can do side scroll maps, and we can do side scroll adventures where your dungeon is a side scroller, where your fighter craft are flying through dungeon caverns to attack massive creatures, like at the 200, 300, 500 foot scale creatures. Yeah, that's stuff you can do if you want to have a side scroll, because it doesn't matter. It's the overhead or side. You still occupy the same space because of the size of your air bubble. So the air bubble helps define your space, like a 4x4 space, like a gargantuan creature, like a 4x4 grid. But it's the 50-foot scale. It's 200 by 200 feet. But you could side scroll and still navigate a map on a grid square as you're moving along the map. It's just a matter of how are you orienting it. It works the same. So we can effectively make space shooter games like Defender or Life Force are the 2 that stand out the most for me. Or you can have an overhead map like Raiden and have multiple little fighter craft that are trying to strafe your ship and make shots at you while you're using your vessel to fire volleys of weapons, just like in Raiden. And then we could have like Raiden upscale stuff, like each shot is like a nuke, like you're firing off like a fireball. Pow, pow, pow. You can have upgrades, like weapon upgrades and stuff. Anyway, you could do that. Using the system, you could do that. But if I were to make like a Raiden RPG or a Life Force RPG, I would probably not publish it on the DMsGuild. I would take all of this stuff, translate it like into kilometers instead of feet, but use the same basic grid language, and then be able to present like minion fighter craft that all they take are one shot and they're destroyed. We could recalibrate the whole game system to do a Defender style game where you're flying along a side scroller and then having new threats appear on the board, kind of like Metroid is a side scroller game, but you're in a fighter ship instead. So, but that's a separate conversation. And that's something I could do as a Kickstarter project. And I could refer to this on the DMsGuild, since it'll be 100% free preview. You can see what the mechanics are that we're providing here. And we say, hey, here's that thing that I did. I'm going to do a Kickstarter project to rebuild this into a sci-fi side scroller Life Force game that you can have, like I could do Lancer. For instance, Lancer is a mecha combat game that doesn't use scaling at all, but we could do a Lancer offshoot as a fighter craft Lancer game using the side scroller format to be able to have a different type of combat. So you could have one encounter as a side scroller to get into an enemy base, land your ship, disembark, and now we're dropping to the 5-foot scale where you're now invading the bunker as individual characters using normal 5e combat. Or this could be Starfinder, for instance, with Pathfinder. We could easily do a sci-fi version of this as well, but I'm doing it with Spelljammer because Spelljammer and Descent into Avernus were what inspired all these mechanics in the first place. And my philosophy is give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So I'll build the book first here on the DMsGuild to pay homage and provide options for Spelljammer to become cool, but then we can then convert all that stuff into a sci-fi book as a third-party neutral concept using general G20 dice, and then be able to use it in Pathfinder, Lancer, the Mage Hand Press has a space game as well. We could do all that stuff, and you could use these mechanics for that as well as a third party, but we'll probably I'll need to build momentum in an audience to be able to successfully do a Kickstarter. So this will hopefully help me build that momentum. Anyway, so I'll need to fix that. And then pilot options. A pilot focusing on the Spelljamming helm can take the following actions: attack, defend, which is an action or a bonus action for the pilot. You gain the following benefits until the beginning of the turn: increase the ship's AC by an amount equal to your proficiency bonus, which is fucking sick. You can then roll with advantage when you take the deflect action and make dexterity or constitution saving throws for the ship at advantage. And then taking damage for the ship doesn't disrupt focus if you use the defend action. So you can soak and ignore concentration checks for losing, for taking damage. And then the deflect is a reaction. You gain advantage on your deflect check, and the deflect is when the ship is hit by an attack. You can make a pilot check with a DC equal to the attack roll, succeeding the check turns a hit into a miss. So this basically, anyone can basically have the rogue action here. So the rogue can be using their reaction like for evasion and stuff like that. And then disengage, action or bonus action. While moving the ship, you can move out of reach of creatures and ship melee weapons without provoking attacks of opportunity attacks, including any change. So you actually get basically rogue type action economy built into pilot actions that you have, just built into the actions as a pilot. So the rogue provides some advantage like sneak attack as well as the free disengage action as a bonus action. But you can do all that stuff as a rogue as well. You can dash. You don't have the dash action, so the rogue has more movement because a rogue can use the dash action, so a rogue would have an extra move ship option that other characters wouldn't. But all characters can basically use the uncanny dodge, which is basically the defend action, and the disengage action. Rogue would have access to dodge though, and if the DM allows them to, then all attacks against your ship will be at disadvantage instead. So the rogue does have stuff up on other characters, but a lot of that rogue action economy is already built into being a pilot. So the pilot actually has a shitload of options to play that helps protect the ship in general, which makes it really fun to decide who you want your pilot to be. But I don't think I'll need an illustration down here. I think I'm okay with that. Here also, probably don't need an illustration. Well, let's see what we have here. Here's some more actions. Hide. You can take, and of course, oh no, it's not dodge. The rogue has hide as a bonus action, so you can do that as well. Hide. You make a dexterity and intelligence stealth ability check to conceal the location of the ship. The result of the ability check is the minimum target DC for any detection check to scan or track the ship, as detailed in the void tracking section below. You can hide the presence of a vessel while within 500 feet of a larger object. You can hide in the presence of a craft while within 550 feet of a larger object. Again, you have to have something to hide behind to be able to hide. Move ship, object interaction or action. You can move the ship up to 5 squares. The pilot can also change scale by 1 magnitude as part of this movement at no additional cost. Creatures have 1 free interaction per turn. Using both an object interaction and action together can move the ship up to 10 squares. Opportunity attacks is a reaction. You can make a ship melee attack against any target that attempts to move out of your ship melee weapon reach during movement unless it first takes the disengage action before moving, as described in the opportunity attack section above. Pace. Reaction. If a target attempts to change its distance from the ship, you can instead move to stay in position, preventing the target from doing so as described in the pacing section above. Ram. You can move the ship in a straight line towards a target and use a bonus action to ram it by making a pilot check against the AC of the target as detailed in the ram section below. Ready action, action plus readied action, similar to a creature readying an action during combat at the 5-foot scale. You can ready a pilot action for a specific condition or event, which you can then use your reaction to complete. Actions that you can ready include ship melee attack, defend, hide, and move actions. Scuttle. After hitting with a ship melee attack, you can attempt to scuttle the target as detailed in the scuttling section below. Scuttling is basically knocking a ship so that everybody aboard the ship has to make a reaction or potentially take falling damage on the ship. Like you're basically using the ship as an object that you're making the crew, like the ship itself isn't damaged from being scuttled, but you can force all the creatures aboard the ship to potentially be knocked out of position. And again, if you aren't adjacent to a ship, you can't use it. So if you scuttle your crew, you knock your pilot out of their chair, you knock people away from their orrery stations, suddenly the ship powers down, and you can't use your hit points to shield the ship until you take your action to get back aboard the ship and regain focus. You can use a reaction, and then we talk about scuttling down below. So you can like literally just attempt to like hit the ship and like knock it off axis, so everyone just gets thrown, everyone gets thrown around. And then you got siege command roll, where we talk about command checks. The level of your character or the CR of the commanding creature is the rank of your ship, is the rank of your commander. And then the rank is the die type that you use. First level characters, D4, 5th level, D6, D8, D10, D12 at 17th level. And that checks against the reload score, which we have listed down for each of the individual weapons. And then heroic commander, choose one of the ability, and instead of using ability modifier, you can, choose one ability score to determine your commander ability modifier. You can add this ability modifier to the command check instead of your proficiency bonus. So you have your proficiency bonus plus your command die is the command check that you make when you make attacks with a siege weapon. But instead of your proficiency bonus, you can use your ability check. So if like you have an 18, like if you're a first level character with an 18 charisma and you want to use heroic commander, so you use your charisma score instead of your proficiency bonus, you can. But by the time you get to 13th level or at 11th level, at 14th level, the your rank is you're using your proficiency bonus is +4. If your charisma is still an 18, it doesn't really matter. So this feat is like something you want to use at low levels to give you an edge. But if you're going to have a 20 level campaign, at some point it doesn't really matter anymore, and your proficiency bonus your proficiency bonus eventually gets to a +6, which is going to be better than any score you have unless you can get your stat up to 22. Like a barbarian can get his constitution score up to 22. So a barbarian using heroic commander for their constitution saving throw or for their constitution score would be as good, or if they get up to a 24, would be better than the proficiency bonus that you would use as a commander in a proficiency bonus. So you can eventually do that. But it's a feat. It costs you a feat to do it, and after level 13, it's pretty debatable whether it's useful or not. But it's there for you if you want it. Not better, except for at low levels. I don't really feel like, I'm not sure. Like there's a space here I could potentially put something in. I don't know, maybe we should just like doodle something. Like have a thing. Ready action, scuttle. Like I could potentially hide, like I could potentially push all this down and create this space and have that space up here. So like it'd be a space like that big, so I could potentially have hide. Like maybe like an asteroid, and then like have your ship hiding behind the asteroid. Like a spider. Like I could have like a little spider craft here. And have your space galleon. Here you can have your fighter craft here. Yeah, like this is like the Neogi. I keep using Neogi and StarCraft and Starmoss because really the only two ships you really fight in Light as Araxis is Elven Starmoths and Neogi spider ships. So that's why I'm using Starmoths and spider ships over and over again during in the illustrations here, because by the time you get done with the book and you get down into the Light as Araxis appendix, you'll have a bunch of examples of artwork and movement depictions using the tokens that you'll be using in those encounters in Light as Araxis. So we're specifically limiting our palette of ships that we're depicting so that they remain relevant and for you to be able to visualize how this stuff works by the time you get down into that appendix. You should be grokking how all this shit works. It's like, oh yeah, these are the spidercraft. This is how this works. Oh, that's the exact size of the spidercraft on the map, so I can see how that works. So you start building that internal language. We can have these ships on an asteroid here. Because there's an asteroid encounter where Neogi are hunting your ship, and you have to fight them inside of these asteroid fields. So you can have these asteroids floating around like this. And your ship is ready. So if I get rid of that, I have this space here, and I can move that space up to here, push all this down, and have that be depicting your ship. I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I can take this. Like that. I think it's great that you're getting it. It's when you start nerding out about the options, that's what makes your brain excited about. Okay, I want to make sure I understand how this stuff works, because it's neat to think about using this stuff. And then when you actually have a game where you have fighter ships that are flying around, then it's like it gets really fucking cool, really really fast. So I'm glad that you're nerding out over it, because that's exactly what we want to do. We want people to be excited about using space combat and to be able to think about, God, what are the things that I can do? And then all that shit checks out. It's like, oh, that's awesome. That's the whole point of it, to make it super fucking fun and cool to use. So we can have like a space backdrop here, and we have these two spider ships that are hiding. Or like we can have like one like this. God, that's so fun. That is so fun. This is going to be really fucking fun to illustrate. I'm looking forward to that. That's a good one. So we'll keep that. And we have that example here. This is like a little pinch space now. Disengage, pilot actions, attack, defend, deflect, disengage. I could potentially have like a oh, that's fun. I can do that. Let's do that. Hold on. Let's grab this. Go down here like that. Grab this. Drop that down to there. Have a little fighter craft here. And have a big explosion. Big bada boom. Arda. A little fireball. A little ship escaping the fireball. That'll be fun. Actually, that's really fun. Coolio, we found some stuff. That's awesome. What time is it? It's 9:30. Okay, we'll keep it up for a little bit longer. See what we got going on here. Taking damage for the weapon and crew. You can take a crew and siege weapons. A siege commander can take damage for siege weapons, because you could fly over and start destroying ships, ship weapons, right? You can destroy ballistas, you can destroy catapults. They have hit points, they're objects, you can destroy them. So you can instead take damage for the weapons and crew by having your siege commander soaking damage for them, just like a pilot can for a ship. A pilot is assumed to be in command of a weapon and its crew unless another character specifically uses a verbal action to take command. That character is now commander and responsible for damage that crew takes. So but you can use a verbal action. A verbal action is basically a free action to declare anything that you're taking responsibility for during your turn until it's your turn. So if you're using group initiative, everyone can just say, I'm going to take responsibility for this ship, this weapon, and this weapon, and the fighter is going to take responsibility for that weapon, like those 2 other weapons. So during the course of combat, the fighter will take damage for any damage that those 2 weapons take, and the pilot will take damage for the ship. A siege commander, a squadron commander that's commanding multiple ships can also command the ship that he is aboard. So you can take damage for any of the ships that you're in command of, as well as damage for the ship that you're on instead of the pilot, if you're verbally taking command of and occupying a orrery station for you to be able to have that command role over the ships that are within your squadron, including the ship you're aboard. So a pilot can use their actions and their attacks to engage at the 5-foot scale, and another character can declare themselves the squadron commander for the ship, and then take damage for the pilot instead. So you could have a pilot that can't take a lot of damage, but can do a lot of dodging and damage mitigation, and you could have, like, say, the barbarian at an orrery station commanding multiple weapons, and then also be taking damage for the ship using rage, for instance, if you wanted to. But he'd have to be using that siege command role to take responsibility for the ship and other ships in the area. But you could do that just the same. It's all the same. Operating multiple ships as a group is the same as flying a ship. It's just you're having multiple ships in formation moving from one square to another as a group. You could have 2 or 3 vessels inside of a 500-foot scale square, and that single 500-foot block of ships all move together as a single creature. And the commander of that squadron can choose how much damage each ship takes on attacks, or how much damage they'll take for the squadron of ships. But considering if you have like 15 ships that are fighting 15 other ships, dealing 600 points of damage, and you want to divide up that 600 damage to 100 damage per ship for 6 ships, you're not going to want to take 400 points of damage for your squadron. You're instead going to want to distribute the damage across all of your squadrons. But it works the exact same way. You're distributing damage. It takes a little bit longer per round to process that stuff, but it's the same action economy for 15 ships to attack another 15 ships. There's just the added step of, do I want one ship to be completely destroyed and reduce the amount on my squadron, or do I want to try to distribute that damage across multiple ships so that all my ships are being peppered by a barrage of fire? And if I as a squadron want to target one specific ship, I have to get inside of the area, inside of the space that squadron occupies, and single out a single ship, which means I have to fly my ship into a batch of ships and be attacked by all those ships at close range for me to be able to target your specific ship that you want to hit. Otherwise, if you're outside of that ship, if it's one fleet attacking another fleet at distance, when I fire a volley of shots into a squadron, that squadron commander can choose which of those ships are going to take the hit, because he can form a shield to have weaker ships hit instead of taking his ship. Or like, yeah, I'm going to take the brunt of this damage for my squadron because that's the kind of leader I am, and I'm going to have my ship mitigate the damage, protecting my other ships instead. You can make that choice. That's your choice. That's your choice to make. So you have attack with a siege weapon, reload the weapon, ready and attack to fire the weapon, and then as a verbal action, take command. And then as a squadron, it's the same as a siege weapon. I can take damage for them. I can fire them. If I have multiple ships in a squadron, I have to add up the reload score of each individual ship. So I can have a full volley, but then I might have to drop down to individual ships making individual attacks because my action economy won't allow me to reload all the ships at the same time. It's the exact same as a siege weapon. It's just a shitload of siege weapons at the same time, all on different ships. And then we talk about damage and stuff like that, but we have a little opportunity here to potentially make an illustration. So let's see if there's anything cool in here. Squadron command roll, taking damage, so I could have a ship here. I can have another ship here. I can have another ship here. I can have another ship here. Another ship here. Just like a little squadron. So all ships have the total pool and certain positions can take damage. So if my squadron was hit for 300 damage, yes. With my character, I could take 100 rage to make it 50 damage, then uncanny for 25. You would have to, yes, you could potentially do that. Have your ship take all the damage. Yes, you can absolutely do that. Yep. But instead, if like say it was 900 damage, you could take that 300 damage as it were, and then whittle it down to that 25, and then that other 600, you could have like say 6 other ships take 100 points each. It's just a matter of how much damage is coming into you. And it depending on the size of the fleet that you're fighting, it can get into hundreds or thousands of damage. So you're sacrificing, like if this ship has 200 hit points, and I've got 1,000 damage coming in, it might pick off 5 ships, but if I've got 40 ships in my fleet, that doesn't really matter that much. So I'm just picking off a couple ships, and they got taken out in the barrage. But yes, at that scale, with that amount of damage, you can absolutely do that. So your higher level characters can potentially take on like 4 or 5 ships at a time, just like a 5th level party could take on like 5 or 6 giants at a time that have like 300 hit points each. It's the exact same thing. Then you can spin out yeah, exactly. Yep. See, exactly. You get it. It takes a lot of fucking text to walk through it, but once you get it, it's super easy. You're just mitigating damage. It's just like taking hit points. It's just like having a shield guardian with your wizard. It's kind of the same thing. Or like a ranger with a drake, like a drake warden is riding on a dragon. That dragon has hit points, the ranger has hit points, and you're sharing your action economy between the dragon and the ranger to be able to make attacks, because that's what rangers do. This is effectively just giving you like a super fucking big dragon to be able to have your drake warden fly around on. But yeah, it works exactly that way. It's that simple. But we have a number of pages in the squadron section specifically breaking down how that works. And like you have to worry about like how large is my ship, what's its range like, do I have a mix of like fighter craft that are like 15 feet next to a Star Moth that's 200 feet? How do I make all those things work together as a single squadron? We have to break all that down. So we have like 3 pages breaking down the math of how you organize things into groups and how those groups move. So it all works like that. It's a lot easier to actually just talk about it and show interaction like this. It only takes a few minutes to get it. But if I'm not here to talk you through it, you have to have a lot of visual examples and a lot of text to be able to walk you through what all this stuff means. Which is why wizards wouldn't bother doing it. It's a shitload of work to do all this stuff. So, but it's worth it. If you can figure it out, it's fucking worth it. So, I mean, hopefully you agree it's worth it. It's at least cool. And it gives you additional tools to be able to do aircraft, fighter ship combat. This all works for vehicle combat too. So, into some of my own games for stuff like hordes and the D&D sessions, but yeah, exactly. This all came from the mass combat army mechanics that we use. All this can work for characters at the 5-foot scale with a troop of soldiers. This initially started with us building little squads of characters that would fill a 50-foot space as a legion attacking like a dragon, for instance. Like we had like one of our playtests was like 40 archers attacking a CR-19 creature, and the characters were 2nd level. And they were able to fight toe-to-toe with the dragon at range because those 40 archers could deal out significant damage to the dragon at the 5 or 50-foot scale. It all works exactly the same way. And from that, we're like, well, what if instead of having a group of characters, it was just one creature as like a massive battle creature? And it's like, well, why couldn't that creature be a vehicle? Wait, that works for Descent into Avernus war machines. Now we have a way to be able to have quick moving combat on trucks kicking across the desert like Mad Max. Wait a second, Spelljammer came out. We can use these same truck mechanics to build spaceships as flotillas. Well, now we can reverse engineer all that stuff and build it into legions and squads of characters, which is in the, if you check my playlist, there's an in command section where it talks about using like that squad of characters to fight a dragon. You can look at the in command playtest, the in command playlist in my YouTube feed. And then you'll see how at one point that in command ends, and like the first couple episodes of the Spelljammer playlist are actually in command Spelljammer combat, and you can see how it transitions from that idea about mass combat into vehicle combat. And this is why I keep talking about like all these people that do like these Kickstarters and stuff to build mass combat systems that don't use 5e combat. They want you to stop playing 5e and play their system instead for like $30 or whatever. You can instead keep playing 5e combat by looking at this different scale and still using the same 5e mechanic. It exists. It literally took me 16 months to figure out all the mechanics that went into it, of playtesting it, making it work, thinking through all the problems that go into multiple creatures moving through space like that, the scale of movement, the time it takes, it all works. You just basically have to rewrite the entire adventuring and combat chapters of the player's handbook to make all that, like to talk about all the little caveats and all the like cover, movement, difficult terrain, area of effect, targeting individual creatures, resistances, blah, 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 like all the little exceptions. It's a shitload of text. But if you have a question like, how does this work? You have an answer for how that interaction works. And once you look through it, once you're familiar enough with this as you are with the combat section of the player's handbook, it all just makes sense because it's all the same language at a different scale and you're mitigating damage differently. But it all came from a druid has 16 wolves on the battlefield. What a pain in the ass to deal with that. How can we still have summoning groups or like have a fighter in charge of a bunch of hireling soldiers? How can we do that stuff and not make it a pain in the ass for the DM the players do that? Well, I don't know. Why don't we just do like a single action for all the creatures to attack together as a batch attack? Oh, that's kind of mass combat stuff. Well, let's just keep blah, 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 blah. And so we have rules about like necromancers creating hordes of undead and commanding them as a single unit. We have druids summoning creatures to command them as a unit, hiring troops for fighters and bards to command as a single unit, a barbarian horde. All that, it all works. And you can scale it up or down as much as you want, but it all uses the same language. It's just, this is the first thing to publish because Spelljammer needs it. It really needs it because there's not enough mechanical language in Spelljammer to make Spelljammer work. So we paused all the command mechanics to do Spelljammer specifically. And now that Spelljammer is getting published, we can then reverse engineer. It's like, hey, those flotillas we built, let's, instead of having a 20-foot by 20-foot fighter craft, let's make it a 20-foot by 20-foot block of creatures that you're commanding to go into battle. And instead of having infinite scaling for high movement, it's like if you want to move 500 feet per round, we're just going to increase the time for combat from 1 round to 1 minute. And then at the end of that round, after you've moved, that's when you take your attack actions. And if nobody moves next round, you're now back into 6-second rounds of combat until somebody moves again. I attack and then take a minute to move away from my troops from the line of scrimmage. But if my team decides to pace and stay in step with you, then you're still having a single round of combat at 6 seconds, but you're just moving across the landscape at this larger scale over the course of a round. It doesn't really matter how long it takes to move unless you actually move away and create space away from the opponents. So we then have to reverse engineer all the mechanics that we ended up building out for pacing and stuff here in Spelljammer, reverse engineer it back down into characters, but all the mechanics are the same. It just takes me a fuckload of time to do it because I'm just an independent developer that has all these ideas. I don't have a studio and $1 million Kickstarter to be able to build all this stuff quickly. It takes me time. So, which is why I stream all this so people can get it. So anyway, yeah, so you're running to... Exactly! My plan was to rebuild both the board game and all the campaign setting, all the campaign encounters in the Dragonlance adventure. So instead of buying the board game for $90, you just buy my supplement for $20. I'll provide you all the maps so you can do all this stuff at the 50 and 500 foot scale to actually have an army of Solamnia going through the adventure, and your characters are the commanders in charge of your battalion as you go through the campaign. Anytime your character dies, Rico, you're now lieutenant. You know, you just recruit a character out of your battalion to become your new character, and you just continue the campaign as a battalion instead of individual characters. When you actually have to go into a dungeon, it's just you just send your commando team in, and the rest of the battalion maintains position outside to defend the dungeon from being attacked by Takisis's forces while you're dealing at that 5-foot scale. When that dungeon is done, you extract yourself from the 5-foot scale, enter the battalion, and then you move across the terrain on the board game scale to move to the next section of the adventure, having to fight dragons, draconids, and like orc troops that are preventing you from getting, like if you want to get to the destroyed city where the fortress is at. That fortress is basically a spell jamming hell. So you have to invade the city, break through the defenses of the city to get to the floating fortress, then get your crack commando team onto the fortress, disable the pilot, load your battalion onto the flying fortress, and then fly the fortress into position to be able to fight dragons as you're defending Solamnia. That's what that's what this does. And you get it. You get it. That's awesome. Story past level 10. Exactly. It would take me a year and a half to build out all the maps and all the terrain and converting all of it, but you get it. It's just a matter of, is it profitable for me to actually build that on the DMsGuild? Will anyone buy it? Will anyone see it? And I'm going to lose 50% because that's how much the DMsGuild takes, as they're 15% to the DMsGuild, 35% to Wizards of the Coast. Or do I release it as a Patreon where I own it, but I have to make it fan content because I'm using all the Dragonlance content? If I'm going to go through that colossal effort of doing it, at what point does it become profitable for me to do that? It might never be profitable, but that is the ultimate expression of how can these mass combat mechanics using 5e be expressed inside of D&D. Dragonlance is the best. Descent into Avernus is the next one. Both of those are amazing to use with these combat mechanics because of the scale, like the Blood War. At that scale, it's ridiculous and it's awesome. Zerial's Blade is a spell jamming ship that fills a 500-foot square. It's literally 450 feet tall. It literally fits inside of a 500-foot square, which is the maximum size that we use for spell jamming ships. The 500-foot scale. It's fucking perfect. It's just literally going to take years for me to build it, and I just don't know if it's worth it. It's a hell of an opus, magnum opus. It's an incredible feat, but it's just, is it worth it? Is it worth the time it takes, or is it better just to describe this stuff and let someone else do it? It'd be a huge feather in my hat to say you don't need to spend $90 on their board game that has nothing to do with 5th edition. Instead, I'll convert all the challenges in the board game to a 5e map at the 500-foot scale for you to lead your army against, so you can get to the next phase of the campaign at the 5-foot scale. That's the dream, but it just takes so much work. It's daunting. And it didn't do well at all. So who really gives a shit? That's why I'm thinking Descent into Avernus would be a better place to go, because you've got the scale of the city, you've got the Blood War at the chains, you've got the ship movement, and you've got the spell jamming ship of Zerial. In our playtesting, we started taking hell wasps, the giant wasp creatures, that are one of the side challenges, but there's this queen that creates wasps, and those wasps are sized large. So we took tormentors, which are huge sized trucks, 15 by 15 trucks, and we started having the night hag, Mad Maxine, using Dr. Zhivago biomechanics, basically melting hell wasps into the infernal war machines, so they became like Lex fighter ships. I don't know if you ever saw that show, Lex. But all their fighter ships were basically like giant dragonflies that you could fly inside of. She would meld the flesh of the hell wasps into the tormentors, so they had little fighter, like 15-foot fighter craft that could fly at hundreds of miles per hour, just like the infernal war machines on the ground. But now they could fly. Like they still have their wheels, but now they have wings that can make them fly. So then we were able to have, fight the two factions of the Blood War, demons and devils, that were trying to get up the chains to take over Elturel. We could have a little swarm of fighter craft and siege weapons at the castle in Elturel, fighting against these swarms of demons that were trying to climb up the chains to take over the city. So you can see in some of the earlier playtest stuff, all the maps that we had in our playtesting, to be able to look at all this stuff. You just see one of the earlier episodes to see where we laid all that stuff out. But it 100% worked. And it was fucking fun to do it. And Descent into Avernus is way more popular than Dragonlance ever was. It'd be a great snub nose to take their, to take their board game and make it 5th edition, but it would probably be a lot more useful and fun to do it for Descent into Avernus. But again, that's taking a 15 level campaign and converting it into our mechanics. That is also potentially a 2-year project. So it's just, God, it just takes so much time, but you can absolutely and should do that. So welcome to my design. That's my big dream. That's the step that we're trying to do here. So you're red pilling with me, my man. But this is what you can do. This is why I keep saying no company that can actually afford to do the research and invest the time to make mass combat and ship combat work in 5e has ever bothered to do it. Not even Hasbro bothered to spend. It took them 2 years to build that board game. And it only took me by myself 16 months to do it all using actual 5e mechanics, which is why I'm so harsh in criticizing all these big companies or these huge Kickstarters that if they had just invested the time could have done this. Meanwhile, me, this little nobody, just invested a shitload of time to figure it out, and it works. So God willing, if I can ever build enough momentum, I can keep doing ideas at these and have larger Kickstarters so that I can start funding these big ideas and have people on board and get it. But I don't have the reputation yet. I haven't earned it. Because I haven't earned the clout. I don't have the reputation. I don't have the leverage, and I have to build that. So I don't know a better way to do it. So this is how I'm trying to do it. So anyway, we're looking at siege weapons here. Weapons and crew. Where are we at? We're at 940. I'm gonna wrap up here in just a little bit. But weapons and crew, because I've got a lot of rewriting I gotta do. But so we're looking at weapons and crew. Describes 2 categories of ship weapons, siege and mounted. These categories include both melee and ranged weapons. Siege weapons. Siege weapons are designed to attack vessels and other similarly scaled targets. As such, these larger weapons deal massive damage, but have limitations on how effective they can attack smaller targets. Objects larger than 50 feet in size, such as vessels, can be attacked as normal. Attacks against objects up to 50 feet in size are made with disadvantage. I should probably word that 50 feet or smaller. That might be a better way of expressing the difference in scale. I might just have to do that. So I'm going to go down here and make a suggestion. Or smaller in scale. Attacks against objects up to 50 feet in size. Oops. Oops, I should really not do that. I need to text and then lock that layer so I don't fuck with it anymore. Here, I can come down here or smaller. See, we wrote all the thing without the illustrations, but as we're going through, I look and read through this stuff to make sure that the text is aligning with the images, which causes me to have to rewrite some of it. And since there's been so much language that Adam Hancock is our editor. He did Orc and an Elf Had a Baby. He also did the Baldron's Guide to Kingdom Building. He also did, I think it's like Build a Shop. I think that's what it's called. But he's done a lot of work that's kind of adjacent to or similar to what we're doing here. It was a natural pick for our editor. It was great having him. But he gave us such consistent language that as I go through and I edit stuff, I can use the language frame that he built and reword information as I need to be able to refer to words. This is why I have to do edits like this on the fly, even though we're in the illustration section. I have to continuously look at, like, do I need to reword this so that's referencing the images that are on the page? The answer is consistently yes, I do. It's good enough as is, but now that we know how the language is being fed in with the images, that gives us an opportunity to key in and make it a more visual experience for people. So anyway, attacks against objects of 50 feet or smaller in size are made with disadvantage, and siege weapons cannot attack objects up to 50 feet in size with half or more cover. Because siege weapons are too big, if you have too much cover, you can't hit them. So ships and siege weapons provide half cover for creatures that are crewing those ships. So you can't use ballistas to attack crew members that are using siege weapons. And you're going to be at disadvantage on attacking a ballista. If you're using a ballista to attack another ballista, the ballista is small enough that it can't be, you'll have disadvantage on the attack. And if you have a defensive shell, like an armored turret, that gives 3/4 cover to your siege crew, you can't attack them at all. They're completely safe. So if you armor up all of your weapons, they are safe from being attacked. So siege damage multiplies the damage die by 10. Alternatively, you can choose to roll 10 dice instead of 1 die multiplied by 10, such as 10d4 instead of d4 times 10, though this can slow down gameplay when attacking with multiple siege weapons. Mounted weapons. Mounted weapons can attack any target as normal. Then we're looking at siege melee weapons. Vessels are typically occupied 2 to 5 squares of 50-foot scale for each weapon, are considered occupying 10 squares at the 5-foot scale. At the 500-foot scale, vessels larger than 250 feet can attack targets in an adjacent 500-foot square. So at the 500, like you have to be fully occupying a 500-foot square to attack something in an adjacent 500-foot scale. Otherwise, you need to scale down in melee combat at the 50-foot scale because you don't occupy a large enough space. Craft occupied 2 to 10 squares at the 5-foot scale. At the 50-foot scale, craft larger than 25 feet can attack targets in an adjacent 50-foot square. So you have a reason you have to scale in and out of combat based on the size of your ship. A night spider ship is 200 feet long. It occupies 4 squares at the 50-foot scale with a reach of 200 feet. A spiderling ship is 40 feet. It occupies 8 squares at the 50-foot scale with a reach of 40 feet. There you go. Dice Goblins unite, d4 times 10. Or you do a d4, a d6, and a d8, roll all those, add that up, and then just multiply it by 10. It's a lot faster. But it's up to you how much you want to grind down the granularity of the dice. If you've got 10 ships in a squadron that are each dealing d6 times 10 damage, you would then be able to roll 10d6 times 10 damage, potentially doing 600 damage in a single volley of ballista fire from a squadron of 10 ships. That's where you start seeing that high damage where you have to decide, am I actually going to take any of this damage or am I just going to let my squadron soak it? But if you're using with the time 10s, you can mix the like 7d8 times 10 damage. Oh, that's 400 damage I'm doing to that squadron. I can then distribute like 40 damage to each of my 10 ships. I just mark them off accordingly. Ship melee weapon attack rolls. Ship melee weapons can be used to attack by rolling 20 plus your proficiency bonus plus your pilot ability score modifier against the AC of the target. When a ship melee weapon score a critical hit, double the number of damage dice rolled. Many ship melee weapons can also be used to take one or more types of attack actions: grappling, ram, or scuttling, as described below. And then we start going through the scuttling and ramming and grappling rules. But we're putting illustrations on this page. So what are we going to illustrate? Mounted weapons can attack. We could potentially have like a wasp. Has a weapon up top here and here. You know what? Honestly, a galleon is probably going to be a better example here. Let's do that instead. Let's erase that. Let's go back into here. Let's grab a galleon. Bop, bop, bop. Back deck, weapon, front deck, ballista, ballista. There. And then we got our cargo hold here. A, B, C. And we can then take this here. Yeah, we can potentially drop this down to here. And we have the ship as a whole as A. Then we have these siege weapons are B, and then we have individual, and then we can have like individual characters on the deck. C. A for the ship, B for the siege weapons, and C for the individual characters. 500-foot scale, or large scale, larger than 50 feet, up to 50 feet inside for siege weapons, and then C would be like the individual characters and creatures on deck. How would we do that? Like we have the ship railing here. The railing equals half cover, so can't be targeted. But this guy and this guy here, no cover, can target. A ship bigger than 50 feet can target. So we could then write, we might have to write like for example, and then do A, B, C, and D. It's like C and C would be crew that are covered by the siege weapons themselves provide cover. So the crew can't be hurt. This guy's along a railing, so he gets half cover as well. But these guys are out exposed in the open, so they have 0 cover, so that would be D. No cover for you. So we can have an example of A, here's the ship, B, here's the siege weapons, C, here's crew protected by the ship and the siege weapons with cover, and then D, these guys are just open deck on the ship, they have no cover. So now you have to start thinking about, if you're engaged in siege combat, I need to move my crew around my ship so they aren't I could run from from mast to mast, and the mast can provide cover for the characters. So you want to move from under deck to the mast, to the next mast, to the next mast, to the weapon crew here, so you can always have cover against siege weapons so your characters aren't called out. But mounted weapons don't have that problem. So mounted weapons, you use mounted weapons to attack crew that are working on siege ships. That's why you need to have fighter craft with smaller mounted weapons like harpoon flingers from Descent into Avernus, do 2d8 piercing damage and have a range of 150 feet. That's why you want to have a bunch of mounted weapons on your ship, so you can take shots at individual characters, because siege weapons are too big to hit these targets. And even though they have half cover, that's giving them it's a +2 to armor class, but you can still attack them. So if you want to take out ship crew, you either dump crew onto the ship and have them attack melee combat, or you do strafing shots with fighter craft using mounted weapons to kill crew on your ship. So that every time you lose a crew member on a weapon crew, the reload die goes up by 1. So if you're a siege crew, like if you're, say, your mangonel with a crew of 5 people has a reload score of 5, if I kill one of your crew, the reload score now becomes 6. If I kill 2 of them, it becomes 7. And now a 5th level character can't reload a mangonel in one shot. He has to spend action economy to reload that, because his crew doesn't have enough people to automatically recrew while they're firing. If I drop that down all the way down to 1 character, that mangonel is going to have a reload score of 9, and I have to be at least 13th level to have any hope of reloading that weapon once, because my action economy as a high level character is strong enough to overcome the lack of crew, because I'm helping in the actions. But most likely with a reload score of 9, and if there's no crew, the weapon can't fire at all. So you have to keep your crew alive, which is why fighter craft are so dangerous. 2d8 doesn't do much damage against a 400 hit point Starmoth, but if I kill all your crew, like a typical crewman only has 10 hit points. So if I can hit you with a 2d8 harpoon flinger, I've got like a 50-50 chance I'm going to kill that guy in one shot. And if I've got 3 shots this round with harpoon flingers, because I have a high-level fighter on my deck, or I've got 2 or 3 harpoon flingers on my fighter ship, I can potentially whittle down and eliminate a ballista team in one shot. If I can kill all your crew, you can't attack me with siege weapons. I can now grapple and board your ship and take command of it. Use my own crew to restock the siege weapons, and I now have 2 ships that I can attack as a squadron to attack the next challenge. So I can go around, bully as a pirate, take command of more ships, and build a pirate fleet. There you go. Fun shit. So this is a worthwhile illustration, and it warrants having an example. So I'm going to have to flesh that out. Actually, it sounds like a pretty fun thing to do. Ship melee reach, examples, Night Spider. So we have here, you have a Night Spider ship, A, and then B. And then I've got my Spiderling here. 40 feet, 200 feet. So that's my illustration there. I can put in that little. Ironically, during in the Ladders of Axis adventure, when you get attacked by Neogi ships, you're on a galleon. So again, this language is feeding into what you'll see later in the book, because we're using galleons, living ships, Neogi, Spiderlings, and Elven Starmaws. And when we get to the fleet section, that's when we start looking at other types of ships, because you have more types of ships when you do the grand finale, the assault on the asteroid base, the Citadel of Light. So that one's taken care of. Let's get down here into grappling. Effective grappling. Where are we at? Oh, we're at 10 o'clock. So I'm going to hold off on time. I've talked a lot, and we got a lot of shit we're starting to put down on the page, and we're starting to build language here. So this is good. But I'm going to cut out for now. We'll talk about grappling, and we'll talk about ramming and scuttling. And then this is just the first book. We have a whole other section. Let's go find it. Combat. The second half, where we start talking about ranged ship weapons, all the different types of weapons, commanding multiple weapons, and then we have the individual description of different ship weapons: ballistas, mangonels, trebuchet, gift giant cannons. We can do an illustration for each of these. And then we have ranged mounted weapons like harpoon flingers, different types of ammunition. We start talking about squadrons and fleets and how combining squadrons, vessels, craft. We can start doing all the language and illustrations for how squadrons get put together, which we already talked about, you intuitively figured out. Squadron statistics, air envelopes for multiple ships working together we need language for all this shit. We have to spell all this stuff out, targeting individual ships inside of squadrons, the type of damage that you can, damage reduction you get for different squadrons. Squadron crews, how those work together, how many ships work together, crew rank, the damage side that they deal based on the crew of the ship. Blah, 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 blah. We have to go through all this stuff as well. And that's another 20 pages that we have of just squadron, crew, range weapon mechanics. So we'll get to all that stuff too. But a lot of this stuff is just diagrams. And diagrams don't require a lot of illustration time. It just requires me importing tokens and then drawing a bunch of arrows and writing examples. So God's willing, we'll be able to punch out this chapter in a couple weeks, because there's only so many illustrations we actually have to do in the morning. And then my off-screen time, where I'd be doing illustrations, I can instead just be building diagrams and rewriting the language to talk to the diagrams. So we might actually be able to, there's not that many illustrations. We actually had we had 4 illustrations in this chapter, like actual illustrations that weren't diagrams. We might be able to punch this out in a week or two. So we'll take this chapter, we'll finish out these little ideations, and then we'll start building the actual illustrations that we have here in the book and make that all work. So that's what we'll be doing for the next couple weeks, building out this combat mechanics. There'll be plenty of opportunities for people to ask questions about what is it that we're talking about on the page, so that we can all grok the mechanics. And once the book actually publishes, I'll do a page-by-page director's cut walkthrough during my lunch streams during the day. I'll be like, hey, we're going to look at a couple pages here of the mass combat of our Spelljammer system, so you guys can see how this works. I'll open up Roll20, and I'll be able to scoot tokens around so you can see how these things interact, see the maps that we used in the past during our playtesting, so you can see how you can work with all these things. And since all those tokens are provided in a zip file when you buy the book, you'll have all these tokens that I'm using in the book will be tokens that you can use on the table on your own grids as well. So that's the idea of it. Anyway, yeah, man, dude, I'm glad you're excited about it. I'm glad. Oh, hopefully you're excited. But it sounds like you think it's cool. But that's all I can hope is if people think this stuff is cool, you can take any pieces of this, and if you use there's a number of other third parties that have created ship combat mechanics for Spelljammer. You can use as much or as little of this stuff with most of them focus a lot of time on movements and like changing directions, like slow ships. Like you have to have so many crew on your sails to be able to get this much maneuverability, to be able to turn this much and around. Your boat's too big, you can't turn that quickly. I don't believe in that. I like how Wizards has that gyroscopic sort of orienting weapons, so you can just freely maneuver around. Just like you can't, like it's like they're inferring you should use 5e scale combat, but they didn't take all the mechanics and flesh it out for you to understand why. This is like a big book of why. Like, why does this stuff work? Why can you do that? Why would you want to do that? What can you do with it? Why are my characters more fun using this system than what Wizards presented in the 2 paragraphs of combat mechanics that they have in the Spelljammer book? Like, it's just a big book of why and how. So, yeah. So that's it. But you can use it with any other system. Like, if you want to use maneuvering and turn radiuses, you can. It just slows down movements inside of the game. You can still upscale and reduce scale. It's just now you have to worry about a turn radius to orient your weapons. Or like if you want to use like weapon arcs, a lot of systems that are out there, alternate 5e mechanics have a weapon arc. Like you can only turn your weapons so far. So if your weapons aren't already facing in the right direction, you now have to spend action to turn the weapon to then actually be able to fire it again. It's like, you can do that with this if you want to. It slows everything down, and it makes, in my opinion, combat less dynamic and less fun because it doesn't feel like dogfighting anymore. It feels like slow naval, what is it, Gentleman and Commander or whatever that Russell Crowe movie was. Anyway, it's more like Ship of the Line, kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean, with ships slowly moving around and doing barrages of fire. If you want to use a slow turn radius system, you can do that. It's not as fun, but if you're on the ocean, you kind of have to. Instead of, most games take the ocean and put it in the sky. In this system, you're just in the sky, and the rules are different. But if you drop down into the ocean, we have movement in the water where you can move and just, you can only turn once per round. And if you upscale past 500-foot scale of movement, you have to take off and fly at that higher speed because ships can't move any faster than that. It's 50 foot. You can't move faster than the 50-foot scale of movement while you're on the water. And you have to obey turn rules. You can only turn up to 90 degrees once per movement if you're on the water. If you're crawling around the ground, if you have legs that you can crawl on, you just use normal movement rules of 5-foot scale. It's just that it's a larger scale. And you can't move faster than 50 feet per round. Otherwise, you have to take off and fly because the movement speed is too great for your feet to move. So you have speed limits that are built into the combat scaling already. It's just that while you're on the ground or while you're in the water, you just have more restrictions on the movement that you need. And if you want more detail, and if you want ships like sails to make a difference, you can. But at any time, you can just lift off the ground and just fly away at 10,000 miles per round. So it's like it's just kind of up to you if you want to do that or not. This is a matter of why would you be on the water? Why would, like, if you drop your ship into a cavern system with creatures that are 50 foot in size inside, yeah, I can fly my spiderling ship and then start crawling around with ballistas on the back of it like a tank, and just start rolling my tank through this large sized dungeon and start fighting these creatures in their own turf, literally. Which is the next campaign I'm going to run with my live team, where they find asteroids, go into the asteroids to clear out the creatures that are inside of it. Once the creatures are cleared out, they can bring in mining equipment, harvest all the crystals and all the iron ore and stuff out of the asteroids, gather all those resources, and then go buy more ships, crew, weapons, and resources and contacts, so they can build an asteroid mining operation using all these mechanics of taking like mecha and tank ships down into tunnels to fight and kill all the creatures that would eat your crew if you started mining it. So you have to kill all the creatures to keep your mining crew safe. So you have mining operations, you have ship combat with pirates and enemy factions, and then you have characters at the 5-foot scale, like if you find like ancient rituals or like different circles and like an actual like fortress inside of this dungeon at the 5-foot scale, you then have to go in there to see if there's anything you might accidentally wake up that could then come out and kill your crew at the 5-foot scale as well. So you have all these different scales of combat you can work at, and that's my Asteroid Hexcrawl campaign, which is the next campaign that my team is at 19th level right now at my home table. As soon as they finish the campaign at 20th level, we're going to start a new campaign, and it's going to be a Spelljammer Asteroid Belt campaign. So, Asteroid Hexcrawl. Anyway, that's it. I got to get out of here. I'm done for real now. Thanks a lot for being around, and I'll see everybody tomorrow. I won't be here tonight. I've got a barbecue tonight, so no evening stream tonight, but I'll be back tomorrow morning to continue to work on this artwork, and then we'll be back at lunchtime tomorrow. We're going to work on the martial power system. We're going to continue working on the barbarian path of the giant. We've got some really fun ways to rework that subclass to use the martial power system. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning, we'll continue doing Spelljammer ship combat mechanic artwork. And then Thursday night, we'll do Eberron. And then Saturday, we're going to continue our Abyssal Weapon book cover that we got commissioned to do, which we started last Saturday. So that's it for today. If this stuff was cool to you, you're checking it out, we're going to be doing this probably for another month or so. So like and subscribe to keep informed of what's going on with the mechanics, where the game is going. And to ask questions, say, hey, what's up? I'll see you guys on the other side. I really appreciate you.